Hello, welcome back to episode 1 of the new FPL Masterclass. The season has come back so quick, Rob. I mean, it was only at the end of the season where we're sitting here thinking, right, we've got a little bit of time off before the season starts. I know a lot of people are really excited. I'm really excited because I'm going to beat you this year. I'm going to take note of what we've done in all the shows, and I'm going to win my leagues. But welcome back, guys. This is episode 1. This is the big team reveal for game week 1. We're really excited to share that with you today. We've also got a newly branded show. It is now the channel is now the United Masterclass. So we're really excited. There's going to be a lot of great content. So make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Rob, welcome back. You're excited, aren't you, for the new FPL season? And you're excited for what's to come because there's so much exciting stuff coming to this channel and we're only going to be going upwards.
Of course, very excited. Brand new season. I've spent the last week or two doing all sorts of FPL silly things. So what do I mean by that? I've been looking at pre-season form, who's playing for what teams I'm obviously not particularly interested in. But when it comes to FPL, you have to have a wide net that you cast. So you can't just look at your favourite team, obviously ours being Manchester United. Of course, there might be people watching this show saying, oh, United Masterclass, I don't want to watch this. I've got nothing to do with Manchester United. Well, we are here for you too. This is not just for Manchester United fans. This is for everyone who does an FPL team and wants to win their FPL league. So we'll talk a little bit about the team that we've picked. We'll have our team reveal at the very end. But what we'll try and do in today's show, with it being a little bit more of an extended version of our normal show, which is about 45 minutes, we're going to go through each part of the park, goalkeeper to start off with, looking at defense, looking at midfield, looking at attack, and try and gel it all together for you to give you a kind of proper overview of the type of team that you should be putting together for the start of the season.
Absolutely. And guys, look, we will do a big team reveal. We'll try and answer as many questions as possible. What we're really going to do is we're going to do a comprehensive go through of each of the positions, the top end, the budget end as well, the mid-range, aren't we, Rob? And we're really going to give you a full, transparent dive into the numbers. We're going to make it fun as well because there's a lot of FPL shows that do get a little bit statty, but we'll try and keep it as lighthearted as possible. But Rob, let's start with the team performance from last season. So let's look at you. You had a really good year last year. 65,000th or in the top 65k in the world. That's 0.8%. So we're in the top 1%. I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And now we're going to be looking at this season. There's going to be over 10 million players this year. He's so cocky, guys. If you're listening to this on Spotify, he's so smug here. But listen, he does all the research, so there's no surprises there. But look, over 10 million players to play this year, the biggest ever. It's there's gonna be a lot of new players, aren't there? So there's gonna be a lot of people that maybe aren't familiar what to do. They might make a couple of mistakes. I mean, before we even dive into the numbers and the teams and the players, what are your, let's say, top 3 tips that you say for any new player that's playing FPL?
Well, every season FPL changes just a little bit, and they change it enough to kind of wind you up. So stuff that worked one year doesn't necessarily work the following year. And, what do I always say? Haider, and I said this last year in game week 1 last year. Don't look at the game as in, what am I doing this week? You've got to look and plan ahead and kind of have your own parameters as to what your team is doing. And quite often, the big mistake that everyone makes, and I think this is going to be in the top 3 things, is that everyone goes tinker crazy. Yeah. Oh, I don't like this. So I'm going to sell 6 players. I'm going to take the big hit on my values. I'll take it off my points, but that's all right because I'll make it up. No, you won't. You'll never make it up. Ever. You get to the end of the season and you've lost your league by 200 points and you'll look back and you'll think, well, the first 10 game weeks, I made 20 transfers and I messed my whole season up. So it starts at game week 1 and then we kind of build from there. And this is how the series of this show will run from each individual game week, is that we'll give you kind of tips of which players are going to do what and how they're going to perform against other teams. What you got to remember is that Liverpool don't always win every week, do they? But they usually do. And City don't win every week, but they usually do. So how do you find the points in between all of that? You get 3 players from each of those two top clubs. Where is the value elsewhere? So in terms of tips, Haider, don't tinker. Have a plan. Have a really good watch list. So keep looking at the watch list and seeing there, and be aware of the fixture list. Know what's coming. Don't just guess. I think there'll be a lot of people here now in our comments will all be saying, yeah, already I can see who's going to be captain, who I'm going to do this. No, slow it down a little bit and start thinking long term, but also in chunks. We'll look this week at first, say 3 or 4 weeks of the season, and that should get you off to the perfect start.
Comment here from Shershah saying, top tip to listen to the show, and then Haider in brackets. Yes, listen to the show. But something else to add as well is don't be one of those people that doesn't pick Liverpool players who support United or, Spurs players who support Arsenal. I don't get it, and it's just weird. Look, it's just a game. So I don't get it. But look, Rob, let's go now into the first segment of the show, and let's talk goalkeepers. So we had a big debate last year about this, and I think we both agree with this, that when we look at the goalkeeping position, there's two ways of looking at it. You look at maybe, let's say, the Alissons of the world, the Lloris and the Edersons. You can see they were the top scoring goalkeepers, also the most expensive goalkeepers. So you could look at that and think, okay, well, these big sides are definitely going to keep clean sheets. But we both went for a two-keeper strategy, didn't we? And we went for maybe a 4.5 million valued goalkeeper that would make a lot of saves. Last season that was Raya. Someone that's going to be in a side that perhaps isn't going to be as high up in the table, but they're going to have a lot of action, which means they're going to get extra points here and there, and they might get bonus points. And then we had one maybe at 5 million as well. So last year I went with the Raya and the Sanchez combination. It worked really nicely, but as the season went on, I took out Sanchez, brought in Ramsdale. I tinkered a little bit here and there, but that worked well for me. So I actually think the one area that worked pretty well for me last year, where I was pretty happy with, was actually my goalkeeping position. And it's the first year that I actually went with two keepers who are lower rated rather than the Alissons, the De Geas, the Edersons. I mean, they're very expensive. And you can see here that the three most expensive keepers, Alisson, Lloris, and Ederson, are probably the three sides I think are going to be in the top three this season.
Yeah, and they are Champions League goalkeepers de facto, aren't they? That's kind of what they are. They play for big clubs. They're expected to get clean sheets. I think what you see every season is, again, and this year they've done it, as at times of tweaking prices. One of the big mistakes that new players make all the time is that you might go for the one big goalkeeper that you like, whoever that might be. Let's say Alisson at the top of the tree. And then you might pick Begovic at 4 million because you haven't really budgeted for it. Just a guess, isn't it? I'm going to put the Liverpool goalkeeper in, but what does that do for you then? Well, it means you can't get 3 Liverpool outfield players, which might give you more value. However, I think what you can see from the numbers and the statistics from last year, and we'll talk to you guys like, say you've never played FPL before, even if you have. So we apologize on game week 1 if it sounds a little bit simple, some of this. But you look at the top goalkeepers, and why are they the top goalkeepers? Well, you look at Alisson there, 176 points, Lloris, 158, Ederson, 155. Not a lot of difference there. But as soon as you start dropping down a little bit, someone like Sarr at Wolves, would you have picked Sarr last season? So Sarr was one of my goalkeepers for a long time last year.
He was a good keeper last season. Good option.
Of course, Ramsdale, a goalkeeper that came in, was a very valuable price in terms of what they were doing. Arsenal not particularly playing well at the start of the season, but Ramsdale picking up points when he came into the side. So it's more about balance, and I think that everyone should always have a 2 goalkeeper strategy. So when you're making your first picks on FPL every season, pick 2 goalkeepers that, one, are going to play, because that's a big thing. Quite often people pick reserve goalkeepers at the bottom end who are not going to play, and then rotate them as you find and you see fit as the fixtures change every week. So you just said there you went with 2 lower goalkeepers last year. That's what I usually do. I'm not going to reveal it until the end, but this year I've gone with a lower or a mid goalkeeper and a premium. It's the first time ever. And the reason why I've gone with a premium is because I've been able to save money in my outfield players. So there's a balancing point here, and I've done all the stats, added up all the numbers, and tried to work it out to make sure I'm kind of making the right decision. Of course, I could change that in time as we go forward. You can sell one of those goalkeepers, get that £1 million back, and chuck it on a premium midfielder. But I think for the start of this year, you look at those top 3 there, Haider, even at that price of 5.5, they are significantly ahead of the rest. They are kind of like in a horse race. It's not by a neck, it's by several lengths. So you've got to try and find a balance. But yeah, if you go with 2 mid-table goalkeepers, that should also still work in the early weeks, because you could always get rid of one if you have to.
Absolutely. And guys, As you can see across the bottom on the ticker, make sure you join our FPL Masterclass League. The code is BI8361. That's BI8361. Sounds like I'm announcing that someone's car is getting towed or something like that. But let's go to the defenders, Rob. So this is actually where I feel the most value is. I felt that last season, and I feel that this season. The reason why I say that is because the game has changed. Modern fullbacks, almost like wing backs, pretty much like wingers. I mean, you saw it last season. Trent, we all know the returns he got. He's almost playing. I mean, he's almost like a midfielder, isn't he? Really, a winger, essentially, in terms of his output. Cancelo was fantastic as well. You can see them both at the top. 208 points for Trent. Cancelo, 201. Andy Robertson as well. Kind of goes under the radar a little bit. But last season, we both, near the end of the season, we doubled up on both Robertson and Trent. And that's why I wouldn't go for Alisson, because there's so much quality that Liverpool have in the outfield players. You're better off going for a Salah or a Trent and a Robertson rather than going for a keeper. Van Dijk was there as well. Matip, surprisingly. But then even when you go further down, you look at Matty Cash, had a really good season. You have Reece James. We know he was injured for quite a lot of season, but when he did play, he gave good returns. Cresswell's another player. Cucurella had a fantastic season. Alonso. So you're looking at all these options. I mean, you could go back 5, really, couldn't you, with these wing backs? Kieran Tierney is back from injury as well. And there's a couple of other players we're going to talk about later on who could be really good options. I mean, why would you go for 3 up front when you've got this much quality and this many returns in your back line?
Well, this is also how FPL has evolved over many, many years. So I think this is my 14th year doing FPL. And in the early years, the weight always used to be that the strikers got you all the points, the midfielders got a big chunk of the points, and your defenders were just like, I'll just have 4 or 5 defenders of around 4.5 million or something like that. And that was the way FPL played out for many, many years. What you just said there is totally correct. You can now start 5 defenders every week because you're getting so many good wing backs, so many good creative players who are classified as defenders. So you only got to look at the top 3 here. It's all easy. This is, again, the bits that I think people do know without even looking. Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, Robertson. 3 players that get tons of assists, man of the match performances. They also score goals. They take free kicks. They take corners. And they are right at the top of the list. But you can see just below them, in terms of the top teams, someone like Van Dijk, 183 points as a centre-back. Matip, who is totally a budget option still even this year at £6 million, 170 points. As you go down there, Matty Cash, who we will talk about in the budget section a little bit later in the show. But you can see the prices then start to get a little bit more favourable, don't they? 5 million, 6 million, 5.5. And then you even get down to the Palace players. Anderson there, 4.5. And it starts to become a balance. So really what we're trying to advise you here is think defenders first. Think midfielders next and think strikers last. That's the way that FPL has kind of gone about its business over 12 months, and you can see the balance. But they're not making it easy for you this year, Haider. They've actually made sure that those real budget picks in defence and midfield have started to slide off a bit. So the value isn't always there. It might well be after week 1, 2, or 3 when someone gets injured and a 4 million defender just pops in and plays at fullback for 8 weeks. Remember last year, Tsimikas? So Tsimikas was that classic one last year. Robertson got injured. Loads of people who picked their team on game week 1, but then don't look for 7 weeks, didn't realise that Robertson was out of the team. And we all bought Tsimikas in week 2 and kept him for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And he got assists and assists and assists and assists. So that's where you have to kind of pay attention and plan it week to week. But you can see that just on this top level here, a real good mix of players and a real good mix of wing backs.
Absolutely. I think I've definitely invested heavily in my defense this year, and I'll review my team later on, but I have gone for the 2 top performers last year with Trent and Cancelo. I thought about Robertson, to save that 0.5, but I just couldn't look anywhere beyond those 2 players. But you've got a little bit of a shock later on when we reveal your team. So now we've got up on the screen, guys, and if you're listening to this on Spotify, what we have on the screen is the best value players in terms of performances last year versus their value this year. So, well, I'm not surprised to see this, Rob, but people might think the players that are the highest value, like the Trents of the world, will be sitting at the top of the table, but the best value defender for this season, based on his form last season, is Matty Cash. And I think at 5 million, that's a pretty good price for a fullback that will be marauding forward. Then you've got Gabriel. That's quite a surprise as well. He's obviously a centre-back. And then João Cancelo after that. So what are your sort of thoughts on this? Because people will obviously go and flock towards the really expensive defenders. And you should. The Trents, the Cancelos, the Robertsons of the world. But, look at the 5 million ones because there's some really good value there.
Yeah, totally. And I think the reason why I kind of created this slide and brought it up and kind of put it into the show is FPL is all really about value. That's what it's about. Anyone can pick premiums. We all do that. There will be premiums in my team. There will be premiums in your team, Haider, and certainly premiums of all of the people that are watching here today. So it's about trying to find those players in the middle somewhere that maybe give consistency over a season, but are not going to blow your budget. So, Matty Cash, I think, again, a fullback, someone who plays progressively on the front foot. And then surprisingly, you've got someone like Gabriel, who's a centre-back at Arsenal. But I think it also shows the strides that Arsenal's defence made last season. So what would you say, Haider? If you're talking to an Arsenal fan, talking to your brother who's an Arsenal fan, there would be that kind of stigma, wouldn't it, that Arsenal are not very good defensively. But if you look at the numbers actually say something a little bit different. So there's kind of becoming a progressive team from the back, and it's reflecting in FPL points. You look at Liverpool, and now again another progressive team. Value in Matip, value in Van Dijk, and even value in Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is the most expensive defender in FPL, but was still the 6th most valuable player in terms of the economics. Now, I haven't picked Trent this year, and I'll reveal a little bit more why that is at the end of the show, towards the end of the show. But last year, my first week, I said to everyone, you must have Trent in your team. So I get why you picked him, Haider. I'll explain why I haven't later on. But it's all about small margins. Like I've been looking at kind of 0.5% millions in the kind of differences in performances. And Trent, of course, is going to get you loads of points. And if you've got Trent, I think you're okay. But does it mean the next defender next to him, could you have bought one at 6 million or 5.5 or 5 million or 4.5? And that's where the difference in true points value lies.
No, it's a good point. I'm looking forward to seeing why, because you obviously messaged me last night and I was thinking, what? Crazy. But no, I'm interested. Now I can see that as well, because I did have the same thought. When I was choosing between Trent and Robertson, I was thinking that 0.5 could go a long way elsewhere in my team. And I also have another player in my team. We spoke about him off air. We'll reveal him later, where I'm thinking maybe he's a little bit expensive. I could save $1 million there. That's 1.5 million. Then either bank that or I can put that back into the team. So let's move on now to the midfielders, the real expensive top draw midfielders. You're looking at the Salahs, the De Bruynes, the Sons of the world. We all know how well Salah did last season. Interestingly, Raheem Sterling, 10 million, which is actually a very interesting value because he could possibly be playing up front for Chelsea. And we've seen him score a few in pre-season. He's got great movement. He's a player that actually I was interested in looking at. I'm really unsure on Chelsea at the minute, Rob, if I'm honest with you, because they obviously got a new owner. I think I feel like their transfer policy has been a little bit scattergun. They've lost 3 defenders, or 2 main defenders. They probably might lose a bit more. Let's hope they don't get Frenkie de Jong. But we're seeing that they are looking to spend big. You might see there's a few Chelsea players, possible Chelsea players that will join. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. But when you look at the midfield, you've obviously got the expensive ones at the top. But as you go further down, Saka had a great season. Bowen had a great season. Mount as well, some good returns. Maddison had a great season considering the way he was before. So is it a case of you have one of Salah, De Bruyne, Son, or Sterling and Fernandes? I'm going to put them both into that, even though Bruno and Sterling are a couple of million less than those players. And then you stack your midfield with those couple of those 8 million, and then you go a little bit lower, and you can see there's the Odegaards of the world. Rodri, who scored a lot of goals last season. I was telling someone who did draft that Rodri is a great shout to put in your team. Smith Rowe as well. Is that how you should play it?
Rodri was in my first draft. He's not in my final draft. So, I think you talk in terms of value. This is where, not where it starts getting tricky, but this is where you can really crunch the numbers and find the true value. So like you're saying there, on the left-hand side, there is the order of price. So these are the top players from last year. And on the right-hand side is more the players kind of who are just below that in terms of their points performance last season. But you can see there's a big difference, isn't there, between Salah at 13 million and then on the flip side, someone like Harrison at 6 million. So, like, do two Harrisons add up to a Salah? So this is kind of the balance of when you're looking at the prices. And I think with midfield, there's value everywhere in midfield because it's about players now who score goals. In years gone by, you'd look at someone like Maddison. So Maddison had a great kind of last 8-9 weeks of the season and kind of bumped him up. He's 8 million here. We don't know what club he'll be playing for when the season starts. Might be at Newcastle, might be somewhere else. But he's a creator, isn't he? You get players who create and don't particularly score goals. But now in midfield, you get that. That's why Salah is the highest value player every year. Son's a Golden Boot winner, isn't he? For the Premier League, he's a midfielder. So you've now got to find a way to have, say, 2 premiums, 2 mid-levels, and a budget that get you goals and assists week after week after week. No guesswork. They've got to be nailed on. And when you've got 2 lists like this, not saying it's easy, but if you really dig into it, you've got a chance. So you just said Sterling at 10 million. So Sterling, I think, will be the centre forward at Chelsea this year. I think he'll be the striker. So you expect him to score every week, every other week, get an assist here and there. Maybe going back to the Man City numbers that he was getting 3 years ago when he was really at the very, very top. But would I absolutely bank the house on that today? No, because there's better choices up there and they're all above him at the moment there in terms of the figures. So it's trying to find those players in the mid-level. Again, we will talk to you about budget options later. I will explain to you my squad at the very end of the show that you can find a really good balance. But it's an exciting mix, that you've got enough players there from a Salah all the way down to a Saka on that left-hand side who get goals and assists all the time. Which teams are really going to pop this season and which midfields are going to be the goal scorers this year. And you don't need a stronger striker set then if you've got midfielders that score you goals.
Rob, as we are doing this show, we are recording this on the Wednesday. Cucurella has signed for Chelsea, 50 million. So we'll talk about him a little bit later on, but that is official. So I think that we've obviously done defenders, but I think that changes things. Now let's move on. So similar to what we did for the best value defenders, we're doing the same with the midfielders as well. So that's performance last year versus the value this year. And you can see at the top, no surprise, Jason Ward-Prowse, Bowen, and Gallagher's an interesting one, isn't he? Because he's now back at Chelsea. He's been playing a little bit in pre-season. I'll be interested to see if he actually plays a couple of games. He was a great option. Then he went on a long spell of not scoring at all. And then obviously Palace's form dipped as well. But back at Chelsea now, so it'll be interesting to see if he plays. I mean, personally, Rob, from what I've seen of Gallagher, I think he's a little bit more creative than someone like Mason Mount. And I think he could be very interesting in that Chelsea side. But whether he gets the minutes is something else. Benrahma was another one actually that flew under the radar. He had a really good start to the season. And then you're seeing a few other players like Saka, Bernardo, but none of the big hitters. Not really that surprising when you actually look at it.
Yeah, and this is what I mean about kind of that midfield stretch of having players who are maybe less fancied, who can do a job for you. And it's just with Gallagher, he's at the top of this. Why? Because he was playing every week at Palace. And he was a perennial for most people because of his value at the time and Palace having a good season. Would I pick him even now at 6 million? No, thank you. I don't think he's going to play enough games for Chelsea. But again, just going down the list from the very top, Ward-Prowse is without doubt the least sexiest name in the midfield for FPL. But absolutely a player you should consider because he takes every free kick at Southampton. He does get the odd goal. He might only score once a month or something like that. He gets man of the match performances. It always picks up those bonus points. And that's why he's at the very top of this list. And again, I think if you ask people just off the cuff who was the best value midfielder last season, not one person would say Ward-Prowse. Not one person. They would probably all say Bowen because Bowen had that kind of breakout year for West Ham. Or as you said, Conor Gallagher. Or kind of Benrahma as well, who had those weeks where he was really good for West Ham, certainly at the start of the season. But you can just see the list there. You mentioned Rodri at the top of the show. I think at 6 million and for a guaranteed starter at Manchester City, who did contribute with goals almost every kind of month, got 1 goal a month, something like that. In a high-scoring team like Manchester City, if you've got Rodri who was starting, 6 million is just kind of easy, isn't it? So if you wanted a fifth midfielder at the lowest value around that price and you didn't really want to go as low as, say, 4.5 or 5, and Rodri at 6 is a really, really good pick, a much stronger pick than, say, Gallagher, who was at the top of this list last season.
Yeah, Rodri was one that flew on the radar, and he's definitely one that I've considered because I want to buy into Manchester City, but like I just think we'll talk about them a little bit later on when we do our teams. But with City changing to a more traditional number 9, and they have sold a lot of depth that's helped them. You know, Sterling's been phenomenal for them over the years. I think they might have a little bit of a slow start, and I'm looking at the midfield options. Yeah, I think Rodri probably offers some really good value, and Bernardo could be off to Barcelona as well, so he won't be on this list possibly as the season goes on. So let's move on to the forwards now, and we've got the top scoring forward. So quite amazing to see Harry Kane up there because he had such a slow start, didn't he? He's always slow in August. That's something we're going to talk about. But he had a very slow start to season until Conte came in, and then him and Son were a sublime duo. Jota, no surprise, he had a fantastic season. He's probably going to miss that first game. But it'll be interesting to see what Liverpool do because they have signed Darwin Núñez. We have seen Mane gone now. They've got Diaz, they've got Salah. I think they also could possibly struggle. Núñez will score goals. He will also miss. But I'm interested to see where Jota plays. Does he slot in the wide areas, which means he might score less? Cristiano Ronaldo's up there as well, which is interesting. Very interesting, actually. I'm surprised about that. Did get 18 goals, though. Antonio had a really good season. Scamacca's come in now to West Ham, so that's going to be interesting. His minutes will probably be managed, which I think is a positive as well, because Antonio looked absolutely gassed by the time he got to January, didn't he? He had a great start and got really, really tired. But looking at these strikers here, Vardy's there, Tony's there, Watkins, Richarlison is missing the first game through suspension. Gabriel Jesus, we'll talk about him later. Great value at 8 million. Mbeumo as well. He's actually sitting in my team right now. I'm debating whether to keep him or not. Kai Havertz will play as possibly a false 9. Danny Ings hasn't really, been particularly interesting in terms of his form. When you're looking at strikers, it feels like this season, Rob, there's a little bit more value. When I look at Jesus, when I look at Richarlison possibly as well, I think maybe for me there's a little bit more value than there was last season, where I just wanted to play a false 9 or no number 9 because the options, the big strikers, the Lukakus of the world weren't getting the returns that their value should have been getting.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a lot more value this year in forwards. So again, one of the things that I would say last year was one of my tips was don't worry about your forwards. Don't spend all your money on Ronaldo. So this was, again, maybe Man United fans especially, Ronaldo coming back to the football club. Literally everyone we knew who were United fans were putting Ronaldo in the team because they're just desperate, aren't they? So, Ronaldo's going to score goals every week. Great. It's not really about Manchester United. It's just about the goals. And this table shows that. He's still got, multiple hat-tricks, didn't he, at times, and scored when United didn't win games. Ronaldo would still get goals. And that's what it's about for the strikers. But again, looking at it this year, there's a much better balance in terms of the values. Is that it's not all just about maybe the top 1 or 2. If you think there, Jotter is the number 2 there. I think Jotter was a midfielder last year, yeah? So this year, Jotta's been moved into the striking department. And at 9 million, you just said there, what's he going to do? Well, Jotta's going to score goals. That's what he will do. It doesn't matter whether he's on the left or through the middle. It doesn't matter. He will definitely score goals. But I think with him being injured in game week 1, that takes away that option, and you shouldn't really be picking him this week. Game week 2 might be something different going on there. But I think when you look at the value on that left-hand side, Antonio, again, the perennial, I think, striker for everyone who was looking at not particularly packing their attack, but just having someone that will score pretty regularly, will get you regular points. Tony proved to be a really good pickup for people. Vardy, less than usual, like 9.5, quite a premium price, 133 points. And then when you look down there, there's a whole load of people, isn't there? A whole load of strikers and forwards that they're kind of a little bit mismatched. Like you could definitely take a punt down there and get something. Broja last year on the right hand side there, now back at Chelsea, but obviously potentially leaving that club, was at Southampton, had an amazing start to the season. I think he was 4 million in the first 10 weeks of the season, and he was scoring goals for fun. Whereas at the end of the season, he got an injury and he was rubbish, and I ended up selling him. So the balance there, there are names there, I think, that just obviously pop off the page. You said about Harry Kane not starting well. He didn't start well last year because he wanted to go to Man City. That's what happened. Now he's been in a proper pre-season. Again, I've done my Tottenham kind of due diligence for pre-season. Harry Kane looks fitter than I've ever seen him at this time of the season, and he's scoring goals. And that Tottenham attack looks primed. It really does.
Yeah, and they could win. Well, they could win the league, Rob.
I don't. What you think? Well, you think that they could win? They could finish above City or Liverpool?
I think City are weaker this year, but only because I think they're going to have to adjust. I still think they're the team to beat. Liverpool without Mane as well. And I think that Tottenham one season, Antonio Conte, he hasn't bought flashy, but he's bought players that will fit the system, the Perisic, Basuma, Jed Spencer's going to look good. They've got balanced front three. They've got Longley now in defense as well. I think that they are the closest to those two teams, and I think you just never know with someone like Antonio Conte. I think they could win the Premier League. That's gonna be crazy, and people are gonna laugh at that. But I do really think that they've got a really balanced team, and Conte's Conte, right? Like, if there's anyone to come in for instant success, and he'll probably be off at the end of the season, but I could see him coming in. He's got the players he wanted. I honestly could see Spurs win the Premier League because I think Liverpool and City are weaker than they were last season.
I definitely am not going to agree with you. I don't think Tottenham, even with all their signings in the world, could get near those two at the moment. When you think that City and Liverpool are going to be a mid 90-point teams, even if a bad season, they might get 91 or 92 points. Do I think Tottenham can get that? No, but I do think Tottenham are a valid Champions League team, and that means that they will win most of their games. So, they will be up there. They might finish the season on around the 80-point mark, something like that. I do not see them competing for the title, but with FPL, what's not important. What's important is that players score goals, get assists, and get performances. And that's why Harry Kane's at the top there, because Spurs had a decent finish to the season. Kane had a really good second half to the campaign, and he ends up as the top striker. Now, there are other striking options this year. We haven't even mentioned Haaland. You talk about Darwin Núñez. So these are premium options that have come into the striking department. So you got the chance to maybe play one of these. But one of those players would definitely, even at this stage, be a roll of the dice, because you just don't know. I watched Haaland in obviously the through the one or two preseason games that he played, and in the Community Shield, and you can see in the Community Shield just not quite there yet. But you expect that in preseason. You're going to be a little bit rusty, trying to get to know your teammates. You just said that you think Liverpool and City are weaker. I just don't. I think Liverpool, without Mane, they've gone out and done what they had to do. They've got 3 or 4 players at the top end of the pitch that are just going to score goals. We've not mentioned Diaz yet. He was obviously on the previous list as midfielders. Darwin Núñez could just break out. And it's the same with City. City have lost Sterling, but they're bringing in a guy that they want to score 50 goals this year. So there's options there for them. I don't think they're going to go to Crystal Palace away or Nottingham Forest away and go, oh, we're not as strong as last year. I still think they'll smash pretty much 15 teams in the division week after week after week. But you look at the list here, and you'll see with my final team in a minute later on towards the end of the show. I've gone for a real strong front three and one kind of wild card option, because I think that there's a good balance of forwards there. You could even look there at Firmino, who last year got 62 points, didn't really play a lot. And as you said with Mane, there is that chance that, say, he comes back into the team, plays the false 9, he might be the guy that benefits the most. He might be getting goals and assists and laying the ball off for Salah to kind of bury in the back of the net. So there's always a kind of option in there, I think, that people don't think about. I think as well, you look at Wilson at 7.5. He's still going to be the goal scorer for Newcastle next year. He was definitely on my first pick of my list when I was going through it. Look through there as well. Che Adams, another unsexy option at 6.5 million, but got over 100 points last year from a team that doesn't really win all their games and doesn't score a lot of goals. So there's options. And I think Richarlison, he's injured this week. You talked about Tottenham, 8.5 million. He might be the guy in 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks' time that we're really talking about in terms of adding to your squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's a lot of more options. I'm interested to see, to be honest, what happens because you've seen Broja go back to Chelsea as well. If they don't get a striker in, I know that they're also linked to Sesko as well, which would be a shame if Chelsea do go and get him and they go and get De Jong. But when you're having a look at some of these options here, there could be a couple that emerge, and at 5.5 million, Broja might play a couple of games. So, Rob, let's move on as well. So, what we've got here is the value on the left-hand side. So this is players, per value. So no surprise, Ivan Toney had a really great season. To be honest, Rob, we were linked with Toney. I say we, Man United were linked to Toney. And I would have taken him, to be honest. For the qualities he has, I think he could have fit the system really, really well. And he's a bit more expensive this year, but he's going to score goals. I'm a little bit wary of Brighton, to be honest, because you've got the second season syndrome. Will that happen again? So it's a little bit of a concern, but you can see here Jotter as well, Antonio Watkins. We know last season, avoid the big, expensive, big ticket strikers. And on the right-hand side, you can see here, you can see Haaland, Kane, Ronaldo. So, these are the sort of the high-end strikers. You're looking at Vardy as well at 9.5. Is lower than previous years. You've got Darwin Núñez at 9 million, which is actually very interesting, Rob, to be honest. A lot lower than I thought it'd be. I thought he might be hitting the 10.5s with Ronaldo. So he's an interesting option because if he is banging in the goals, I mean, he's a good whole 2.5 million cheaper than Kane and Haaland. So he's a very interesting option, but I'd be avoiding him for the minute. Haaland, I'm not unsure about. He's not in my team for the moment, but I'm really debating whether it's him or Kane that's sitting my side. So look, very interesting option. Chelsea have Werner and Havertz. Werner's probably off on loan soon. So looking at these options, Firmino as well. What are your thoughts here? Because there are some good, not top end, but some good mid-range striking options.
Yeah, like last year I said that don't go for big ticket options for the striking because it's just in terms of returns, they weren't really there when you looked at the numbers. This year I think it is kind of morphed the other way. It really has. So I think you've got big ticket strikers that could really do the business for you. So we did advise against Harry Kane last year in the early weeks of the season. Why was that? Well, because he just doesn't start very well generally, but finishes exceptionally. But he was right at the kind of top end of value. So if you want to go for a big ticket striker, you look at Harry Kane there for the season. And what did I say at the start of the program? Make sure that you're thinking for the whole of the campaign and looking at it in blocks and breaking it down and thinking long term. Harry Kane as a long term option, even at 11.5 million, he was there at the top half there of value strikers, even at that price. You look at Haaland at 11.5, there's every chance that Haaland, when you look at his goal record from Dortmund and what he's done throughout his career, he could become a goal a game striker. And he could even be one of those strikers like Ronaldo was back in the day of getting hat tricks every month. So Ronaldo did well last year and still did that, still got his goals, but didn't really help Manchester United win. And of course, this is not a Manchester United program. This is an FPL program, so we don't talk about our team too much. But you look at the kind of balance there of the players that you've got, and you look at the top teams, and there's a lot of mixture there for kind of mid-table clubs. So Edouard there is a player that did really well at the start of the season and then completely fell off, did nothing. Chris Wood, a player that did nothing at the start of the season, went to Newcastle, didn't score loads of goals, but started to do much better. And then you got Danny Ings, who used to be my favourite player for every season. Wherever he was, I picked Danny Ings because he was value and he always scores goals. So we don't know if he'll play or be a starter this year at Villa. He might well be. There's a good mix there for you to kind of mull over and see who you want. As I said, Jotter on that side of the list there. I think Jotter at 9 million is a much better pick today, if he was fit, than his teammate, his brand new teammate there with Darwin Núñez. Now, Darwin Núñez might just completely light fire, and score goals and goals and goals. He might take the Mane goals of Liverpool. But I think Jotter is a player that has just done it, isn't he now? Year after he did it at Wolves, he's done it at Liverpool. 9 million. As I said, I think if he was fit and ready to go in game week 1, he would certainly be in maybe my top 3 or 4 picks for the whole of my squad.
Yeah, Núñez is someone that, for me, he's either going to bang in the goals. I think he's with the right manager, Rob, the right style of play.
Of course.
I don't think he's the greatest with the ball at his feet, but he's very direct, very powerful, good progressive ball carrier. So he's, very, very interesting option at 9 million. I was quite surprised when I was doing my team just to see how cheap he was. But the alternative, Rob, he could flop quite heavily as well because he hasn't looked particularly good, but he had a good impact against City in the in the Charity Shield. So let's move on now. So what we're going to do is we're going to do head-to-heads. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk them through, and then we'll also talk about a couple of alternatives. So we're talking about the premium sort of head-to-heads here, Rob. Salah versus Son. No surprises here. The 2 Golden Boot winners last season, they had really good seasons. Son especially, not one penalty goal, all the goals from open play, which is phenomenal. Mo Salah, every single season since he's been here at the Premier League, he's been the leading player. It's almost crazy to think not to have Salah in your team. And look, 59.8% own Salah, only 25.4% own Son. So that kind of concerns me if I went for Son, just because, if it doesn't perform in that game week, already you're behind. I know it's very early days. But what are your thoughts here? Because, there is a considerable price difference. Well, 1 million is quite a lot in FPL terms. So what are you thinking? And there's a question here saying Haaland or Kane. Don't worry, we are going to speak about Haaland and Kane in a second. So don't worry, guys. We've got you all covered.
And just thanks to everyone that has joined us live. You see there's loads of people packed in the comments, so thanks for that. And guys, if you're enjoying the content and enjoying the show, please hop on Twitter, go to either my handle there, which is on the bottom here, or to Haidar's. And if you could retweet the show, that would be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, these are the 2 super premium midfielders, aren't they? Obvious why. Salah at Liverpool, Son, as you said, Golden Boot winner. Interesting to look at the kind of up-to-date FPL credentials here of Salah at the moment being owned by just under 60%. Not really a surprise, but I was surprised that only 25% have got Son, the Golden Boot winner, with a Tottenham team that's much improved. So not really too much to look at in terms of their ICT rankings. Salah is number 1, of course. Son is number 2. You look down the list, there's a new thing on FPL this year, which didn't really use a lot last season, but I think they're making more of a thing of it this year, called Fixture Difficulty Rating. So we've got the first 3 there for you. And it's just a kind of number rating. So like 2 being very low, 1 being very low. And you look at them and they've both got good starts to the season. Salah has got a game against Manchester United in the 3rd match. And last year, I think did he score a hat-trick against us in that game or something like that? Was I there? I was there. Do I remember it? I try not to. But these 2 super premiums, I don't think you can go wrong. You said about the £1 million difference. And this is where I talk about the numbers and the crunching. Because can that 1 million go into another player who's either a budget or a mid-range and get you the extra points that, say, having Salah would? So last year I said you cannot have your team without Salah. And you're going to see in my team reveal quite soon that I might have gone against that. So we'll see. But I think when you look at these 2, you can't go wrong with one of them. You've got to pick one of them at the very, very least. And then there are other options at the top end to kind of complement both these midfielders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, is Rob bluffing? Is he going to tell everyone not to bring in Salah, and then he's going to bring in Salah? Because he did it a few times last season, Rob. You're like, I'm going to do this, and then you do something different. So,
but I always explained it. I always explained why, because there is definitely, it is a case of juggling all the balls with FPL. And of course, like if Salah gets a hat-trick on game week 1, and I haven't picked him for whatever reason, and I'll give my reasons for my team later, then I'm wrong, aren't I? That's just the way it goes. But how do you make sure you're wrong less of the time, week after week after week? So that's how about you building a profile of a squad that gives you points return. So even if Salah does get you a hat-trick, what if Son goes and gets a hat-trick and 3 assists and, put the ball on the end for Harry Kane to put away? This is the balance, you see. And I think Son proved it last year, that Son can get you elite number of points. 258 points last year he got. Yeah, so he got just within 10 points of Salah. You wouldn't have done badly last year if Son was your main midfielder. And I did at the end of the season. I had both of these 2 players in my team.
Yeah. That's the balancing act. But you just can't fit in Salah, Son, and Kane. And we're not even talking about De Bruyne yet. You just can't fit those 3 in without sacrificing everything else in your team. So I feel like if you're gonna have Salah, Son, and Kane, you can have 2 of them.
Yeah.
But you're risking, and that's not including obviously if you want to go for Trent and Cancelo in your team, and then it starts to build up. So yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one as absolutely. So let's talk about Bukayo Saka, because he is the alternative now. When you look at the price at 8 million, he has gone up from last year, but he had a great season last season. You can see here from his ICT ranking, he was 4th in the whole of FPL in terms of the players. And when you're looking at also the price, 8 million, that's 5 million less than Salah, that's 4 million less than Son. So really good season. Arsenal strengthened really nicely as well this year. They brought in Gabriel Jesus, a player who's been an absolute fire in pre-season. I think he's going to be one of the signings of the season. I said at the time when he signed, I said this is a really good signing for Arsenal. Obviously, my brother's very happy. My roommate's also an Arsenal fan. He's very, very happy with the business that they've done. Owned by 21.4%.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I tried to fit him into my team when I did it the other day. It was difficult because I have Salah and I have Kane. I also have Trent and I have Cancelo. Is he a must-have in your team, Rob? When you've got someone like Martinelli for 6 million, although Martinelli could get rotated, but is Saka more of a must-have? That's a crazy thing to say. Than let's say Salah and Son because of the fact his value is so good.
No, he's not a must-have, but he's a probable. He's a could-have. So you look at Saka, we don't need to go too much into him as a person, but he can play wing-back, he can play 10, he can play 8. So you're seeing last year that he kind of played all over the place for Arsenal at times. But what he's doing is he's getting you returns, either through man-of-the-match performances and becoming a much more kind of cerebral goal scorer now, something that we didn't really expect to see from Saka. But Arsenal are an interesting team. We will talk a little bit more Arsenal kind of as we go through to the budget section, because they're a team that have top 4 aspirations and have a real raft of players that in FPL are cheap. So Saka is almost at the top end of that when it comes to choosing. The reason why, again, I placed him in this segment of the show was that I wanted to kind of show the difference between, say, a Saka, a Son, and a Salah in terms of the premium and the numbers. But at 8 million getting you 179 points for the season is pretty good. So again, no surprise that 21% of FPL managers already own him. I wouldn't say he's a must-have, but I think when you look at that Arsenal team, you've got to kind of crunch numbers inside which is the player who's really going to pop at the start of the season. You said Gabriel Jesus. Well, that might mean that Saka's putting the ball on Jesus' foot when he's scoring goals, isn't it? You mentioned Martinelli, another player that I will talk about later on. Martinelli has been starting pretty much all the preseason games. So there's a kind of indication there from Arteta.
Interesting.
That Martinelli, who last year I think had a run in the team up until January or so it was, just from memory. And then he kind of dropped out a little bit, kind of was on the bench, and he was still coming off the bench and scoring goals. And that's the perfect player. You know, someone who...
Smith Rowe was the one that was banging in, wasn't he, from the beginning of the season? Then Martinelli came in.
Yeah, so Smith Rowe again. So Smith Rowe I don't think has played as many in preseason, and he's kind of inconspicuous in his absence.
He's been injured, Rob, I believe.
So he's had the injuries from last year, and he's still 6 million, which is the same price as Martinelli. Again, I've kind of memorized all this because I've read so much of it now, going over and over. This is how you play FPL. But Saka, a really good alternative. That's the point of him being here, is that if you wanted to say only take one of Saka, one of Son and one of Salah, then if you're putting Saka with one of those two, it's a pretty good foundation for your midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. I think I'm still going to be tinkering away. I had Saka in initially, then I took him out. Yes. I will be tinkering away. I know that. I'm happy with my team at the minute in terms of balance, but I still feel like it's not quite right. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Let's move on now. Trent versus Cancelo. I mean, look, there's absolutely nothing between them in terms of output. You know, Trent was a bit higher in the ICT rankings last season, 7th out of 558 players. You saw Cancelo in 19th. Cancelo is 500,000 cheaper. He's owned by less, 45.1%. Trent, 7.5 million, 58% ownership. Rob, when you're looking at this, you've gone Cancelo, I believe, haven't you? And why not Trent, though? I want to ask this. Are we going to talk about this a little bit? But I just want to ask, like, I in my head, I don't understand it. I know you said earlier that obviously there's 0.5%. You've crunched numbers with Robertson. It's actually not that much difference. But Trent is the top performing defender. He's gonna be consistently good. Like Darwin Núñez is now in the side as well. He's at Liverpool. There's more of an opportunity for him to cross. There's someone going to get on the end of it. I actually feel like he might even be more dangerous this season because of the fact he's got a target man in the box.
Yes, potentially. But as you said right at the top there, it's that 0.5 in the price. So he was 7.5 last year, and I bought him. And as I said, he was the number one pick. I was like, you've got to have Trent in your team, because even in weeks when Liverpool don't play well, Trent will get clean sheets. He will get assists. He'll get man of the match performances. He'll swing the ball in from corners. He takes free kicks. He sings a theme tune. He writes a theme tune, all of that. But I think, again, it's balance. So it's looking at players who are equivalents. So João Cancelo got literally, here we are, 7 points less for the whole of the season and is 0.5 cheaper. So I'm not saying to people you should have one or the other, but that's what I've decided to do. So again, team reveal later. I'll explain that at the time. I think when you look at Cancelo, I think City had a better defensive record than Liverpool over the course of the season anyway, but it's negligible. But Cancelo, again, when you look at Haaland being in that team, and City maybe being a little bit geared to getting the ball to that blonde striker through the middle, Cancelo is perfect for that. So you just said there about Trent. Trent plays on the right, and this is my thinking. And who's not on the left this year? Mane. So this is the whole point when that ball goes right to left from the cross. So I'm not saying that Darwin Núñez won't score goals, and I've obviously bigged up Jotter and said that I would have him in my team. But when I've gone down to it and really kind of crunched it, I've looked at Robertson on the left, and I'm thinking Robertson's crossing that ball to Salah, and it's 0.5 million. And when you actually add it up and look at Cancelo and Robertson, who are both 7 million, that's 1 million, because you can actually get that 1 million out of them and put it elsewhere. So that's my reasoning for it. As I said, I will explain a little bit more later. But that's, you look at these two, nothing in it really. It's just preference. And there's no doubt, again, that if you pick Trent and Trent's your number one pick, you'll be fine. Trent is a brilliant player and number one there in ICT rankings for defenders. 7 overall for every player in the Premier League. High caliber player. He'll do well again, won't he? But there is a better mix out there, and it doesn't include Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Interesting. I can see your points for sure. Well, here we've got the alternative. I'm going to bring up another player.
And this is one of the guys, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the guys. So look, Zinchenko's gone to Arsenal. I think it's a good shout. I did consider Zinchenko as well. Just we need to see where he's going to play, though, Rob. I know that he's down as a defender. That's why, in some ways, he could almost be the perfect player in the sense of. Do you remember a couple of years ago, El Mohammadi was down as a defender, but did he used to play on the wing, or was that wing back? Remember,
wing back.
Wing back for Hull City.
Yeah, got great returns.
Yeah. So we could see Zinchenko. He's down as a defender. We could see him playing midfield for Arsenal. There's no reason why he couldn't. So which means he could get clean sheets as well as assists. I think he probably will play at left back. I know Kieran Tierney is fit, I believe, but I actually think that when you look at Zinchenko, I think he'll end up playing in midfield personally. At 5 million as well, look, he's considerably less. Another player that's been mentioned and a player that is in my team, and I'm not really high on Man United in the sense of bringing players in, not because I'm not hopeful. I actually think that I've liked what I've seen from Ten Hag. He needs a few more additions, but I think United, I'm quite excited to watch this play. You're already seeing those patterns and principles in preseason. I know there's Cohen in the comments here that wants to hear about United, and we've got something cooking on Saturday night in terms of a preview. So make sure you keep in tune with what we're going to be talking about. But Dalot, Rob, he's been playing inverted. He's going to be getting forward. He's going to be influencing in attack. He's going to be pivotal, I think, for United. Malacia is another one, although I don't know if he's going to start. I wouldn't put him in now. But, United's fullbacks aren't going to be sitting back, let's say. They're going to be pushing forward. The amount of times that Malacia played that forward ball, that progressive pass to Martial. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is United fullbacks are going to operate more like City Liverpool's fullbacks in terms of being attacking creative outputs. So Dalot is about 4.5 million, I believe, and Malacia is 4.5 million as well. They're potential alternatives at the price they're at. And I know it's a little bit of the unknown, but I think they're worth, at least one of them, especially Dalot, he'll start, is worth taking the punt on and having in your squad instead of someone like Zinchenko.
Of course, FPL managers always take punts and stuff like this. But what we try and preach, we again did it last year, I'm going to do it this year as well, is try not to take punts. Look at the numbers, think about the numbers. I watched every preseason game, obviously. I'm a Manchester United fan and work in the business. And I think we got 1 assist from fullback. It was Luke Shaw. So that was the whole preseason tour. So I don't remember Dalot getting an assist at all. I don't think Malaysia did either. So, yes, you could get them. They're cheap enough to put punts in. Do you want them to be part of the core of your 11 every week? No. But this guy, you might want to, because Zinchenko, you look at this, right, and you look at kind of what he's going to do at Arsenal. The big issue on game week 1 is that he's only just signed for the club. So will he start in game week 1? Maybe, maybe not. That's a problem. But £5 million, you've got to look here at the one metric on this slide that we put up here. Creativity, he was 33rd in the Premier League last year, and he only got 59 points. So it tells you when he's on the pitch, which obviously is not for Man City, he wasn't on the pitch all the time, very much a kind of rotational option. Someone get injured, he'd come in, play fullback, play defensive midfield, then he'd be somewhere else on the pitch for Pep Guardiola. When he was on the pitch, he was highly creative. So that tells me that in a creative team like Arsenal, who have now got Jesus at top, we just talked about Martinelli, we talked about Saka, this guy should be involved in that somewhere on the pitch. At 5 million, you might even see him as a creative midfielder at times. He might even be playing up as the 10 or something crazy like that. We don't know. But the point is that if you're going to take a punt, this is the kind of punt you should take. Don't go for Diego Dalot at 4.5 million. Like if he pops and United start playing well, then it's kind of someone you draft in maybe in the first few weeks. You know, you've got to remember that City, the Man United run into Liverpool in game week 3. So I don't want any United defenders in my teams at that point because you just don't know. But this guy, I think here as a defender, I think it's a no-brainer at 5 million. I think he's someone I think is going to be highly influential at Arsenal. And if Arsenal are a top 4 team this year, Zinchenko, he got 59 points last year playing minimal minutes and 33rd in creativity. He could be a top 10 creative player in the Premier League this season.
Interesting. Interesting. I did think about Zinchenko. I'm going to need to crunch the numbers again, but no, interesting. Let's move on now. I know, so mate, it's got me thinking. Brendan in the comments was asking Haaland or Kane. We are here now at Haaland or Kane.
Here we go.
So this is one of the big. I think this is probably one of the biggest calls, Rob. Now, for me, it was actually pretty simple, just because, like you said, I was looking at Harry Kane's. I was looking at him in preseason. Looked at it because I'm always intrigued because he always struggles in August. We know that, but I think he's going to break that duck this year. I think there's no doubt about it. I think he
looks really fit.
Raring. Yeah, he looks like you said, probably the fittest I've seen him. He looks raring to go. He looks happy. Spurs, his front three is very nicely balanced. I wanted to buy into Kulusevski. I went with a different player instead, and we'll talk about that later on. But I thought for me it was actually an easy option. That doesn't mean that I don't think Erling Haaland might score more goals than Harry Kane. I just think for the beginning of the season as we're starting, I just felt like Kane was just a safer option. As you said, don't take punts. And I just feel like Haaland, people are selecting him on reputation, I think, rather than what we've seen tangible. Do I think Erling Haaland is going to score 20 goals this year? Probably. City creates so many chances. Do I think Erling Haaland is also going to get arrested because he gets injured? He has injury problems. Yes, I do. That's something I've taken into consideration. I'm taking into consideration as well. We know that last season he played 24 league games out of 38, I believe. Might be less than that. He has got injury problems. Pep will rotate him. City have got options. So I just feel like Kane is a lot more solid in terms of his availability and when he'll play. We're looking at the total ownership as well. Haaland 47.1%. That's very high compared to Harry Kane 26.3%. I mean, it's almost double. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's I've seen a lot of people Haaland in their team, and I don't blame them, but I would be holding off just for the moment, I think.
Yeah, I'm not going to kind of judge Haaland on, a Community Shield performance where he had an open goal and hit the crossbar and didn't go in. I'm not going to judge him on those types of things. He's going to be a top striker for City. He's going to score lots of goals, absolutely, over the course of the season. But with them both being 11.5 million, exactly the same price, you've got to kind of think about what are you getting for that. So Harry Kane last year, 192 points for the campaign. Really, really good, as we said, in the sense that he didn't even turn up for the first half of the season because he was desperate to actually be in Haaland's shirt at Manchester City. But when you look at ownership, I think 26% is crazy low for Harry Kane, someone who just does it every year, week in, week out. And as we're saying, a really much more functional, expressive Tottenham team this year that I think will be much better in attack. Harry Kane's going to be the centre of that, the captain and the main goal scorer. One of the big differences between Kane and Haaland as a profile of players, which we don't have stats to show you here, but we know, is that Kane gets assists. Haaland doesn't. So that's the kind of little extra bit, isn't it, about who are you playing with? So Manchester City tend to, over the last year or two, spread the goals about. What you might find this year with City is that Haaland does score the majority of the goals, but is he putting the ball on a string for someone like Grealish or a Mahrez or someone else to score? I don't really think so. I don't think we're going to see Haaland be that player. He'll be a classical number 9 through the middle. He'll drop off every now and then. He'll run channels. He'll do all that stuff. But I don't see him being an assister. Harry Kane, one season, had something like 20 assists or something crazy. I think it was a couple of years ago, because he's got Son with him. And this year, he's got another good player with him, isn't it, with Richarlison? So you talked about Kulusevski there. Kulusevski was one of my wildcard picks when he came to the club, and I kind of went for him with his early numbers, and he did brilliantly for me. And I've avoided him like the plague. Why? Because Spurs have got too many options now in that part of the park. You know, there's a chance. I think the last 6-7 games of the season, Kulusevski dropped out the starting 11. That doesn't mean he won't start this year.
Do you think Richarlison's going to start instead of him? Do you really think
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No
100%. He's been bought to do that. Yeah, I think when you look at Kulusevski, he's now going to be your auxiliary forward. Yeah, he's going to be the guy that comes into the team when you need something a little bit extra, maybe need a little bit more width, someone to kind of make up numbers when you're kind of trying to keep possession of the ball in certain parts of the park. And Richarlison's going to be a starter. No doubt about it. Richarlison's going to be, if he's fit,
but the reason why
that's that front three that they will go with for the season.
Reason why, so yeah, Shoshar's saying here, we know that Richarlison is actually obviously he's suspended for 2 games because he's out. He's out because of what happened end of last season.
Yeah.
But no, Rob, I feel like the reason why Son and Kane elevated their game as well is because, and I think back, it reminds me of, you know, when Eriksen was playing with Son and Kane.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Richarlison's I don't feel like he's a creator. I feel like why Kane and Son were so good is because what Kulusevski gave, which was a little bit different, was he gave a bit more accuracy, a bit more creativity. Richarlison's going to be similar to Son, you know. He's going to be a good goal scorer. He's going to be a bit more explosive. But Kulusevski was the creative one. I mean, how many assists and goals did he get? So I'll be surprised. I mean, I think if you have Richarlison there, there'd be a bit more firepower. It'd be a bit more, there'd be a bit more energy. But I'd be very surprised to see Kulusevski drop, especially when I look at that or rested and Richarlison. So I know they spent 50-60 million in Richarlison, so that's I think that could be a factor. But when I look at that midfield, Basuma's come in now. I don't see a heck of a lot of creativity with Bentancur and Basuma. So I'd be very surprised to see that. But that's interesting.
The marker is Kulusevski last year, despite how well he actually did in terms of FPL numbers, and he was great, was that he got dropped. So that's it. So when Tottenham were chasing Champions League in the last weeks of the season, he didn't start games. He was put on the bench. So that tells me that Conte doesn't not fancy him, but sees him more as a squad option going forward. And if you spend that kind of money on a player like Richarlison, who can both play centre forward and play on the right, it's setting up your attack to look a little bit more like Liverpool's. So when we talked about Liverpool's in years gone by with Mane, Firmino and Salah, this is what Tottenham are starting to build when they're looking at their attack. Kulusevski, great player to drop in there when you need, but I think he's going to play less minutes. So people that buy him as one of your starting midfielders, I get the feeling the first few weeks of the season, he might still get you points, but he's not going to start matches. And that might be a problem as they kind of iron out where they go throughout the season. He might be kind of a bit more of your golden duck. When you look at his price, Haider, he's pretty expensive for what he is now. There are better options.
About 8 million, yeah.
He's about 8 million, and I think there's a million better options at 6 and 7s. There's a million better options. One player that I put in my team, who we were going to talk about in the budget section, a former Man United player. What did he used to do at ours?
Oh, God.
What was it? The Thing or whatever. He's 7 million. And he's got a proven record of scoring goals. He starts at number 10.
Yeah, he's going to be.
So we can talk about him later. We won't go on. Yeah. We won't even reveal his name yet. So if you're not listening, you won't even see. If you're not watching on YouTube, you won't see the little sign that I did. But yeah, there are better options at that 6-7 million price point in midfield. There's so much spread out. Whereas I look at Kulusevski, he's at the top of his value because of what he did last year. But I don't want an £8 million guy that comes off the bench and gets me 1 point every week. That's the risk with him now because Tottenham are strengthening that department. It tells you what they're trying to do as a football club.
Interesting. That's one which we'll have to see.
Haider's taking notes here. Last year, I used to rip Haider. I used to rip Haider last year that he didn't listen to the show, even though he was part of it. And he was like miles down the league. I was like, why did you not buy that player? And you're like, oh, I didn't listen. I wanted this. That. This year, I know he's listening. So
you know I'm listening this year. I'm taking it a lot more seriously this year. And listen, Rob, like, I've got a.
It's all part of the fun.
Last year was embarrassing. Too embarrassing. Once I started listening, I started shooting up the table again. So
you did.
Yeah, and I did. I mean, one of my mistakes last year as well is I left my chips too late. I had 2 chips, I had a wild card, and I had a bench boost in it, and they both absolutely flopped near the end of the season. So these are things I'm definitely gonna learn. And look, I want to win, and there's a bit of money in some of these leagues, so wouldn't be bad winning some of these leagues. But look, Rob, now we're going to talk about the player who is the highest highest owned player in terms of percentage, 72.8%, which is huge, massive. No surprises here, and that's Gabriel Jesus. And at 8 million, he's on an absolute fight. He scored 4, didn't he, against Sevilla? 3 or 4.
He's in crazy.
Going to play as a number 9. I think he's going to absolutely explode this season. I was always a bit of a fan of him at City. I thought he was really underrated, and I think he's made the right move moving to Arsenal, and Arteta as his manager. He knows him from his time. Arsenal I think they've got quite an underrated side. They've got creative wide players. I think they're a little bit weak in midfield, but they will create chances. I think Gabriel Jesus is a must-have in anybody's side at 8 million because he's considerably cheaper than the likes of Haaland. Darwin is not too far off his price. The other player you've brought up here as well. So these are players that we're saying, outside of the head-to-heads that we've just done, players that should be considered. I was thinking about this player, Julian Alvarez, 6.5 million. He's a player for me who I actually think is going to surprise a lot of people this season. Everyone's talking about Haaland, but I actually think Alvarez is going to have a breakout season. He already had a great season last season. He's versatile. Talk to me a little bit about Alvarez as well, because I know that you're a really big fan of him, and he's someone that you're pinning quite a lot of hopes, I think, on him.
Well, absolutely gutted that Julian Alvarez ended up at Manchester City when Manchester United went for him first, and then decided they weren't going to get him. So, I'm also a River Plate fan. It's my favorite club in Argentina. So I watch River Plate on the back. Obviously, Manchester United first, always. But Alvarez, you could see the kind of player he's going to be, not just a goal scorer, but creator, a leader. He does all sorts of stuff.
16 million, Rob.
Manchester City knew what they were doing. They know what they're doing. So we'll mention him here. But of course, Gabriel Jesus, there's a reason why 72.8% own him, because it kind of feels like he is the must-pick player this year. It really does. So we talked there at the start of the striker segment about Kane and about Haaland. Haaland is without a doubt going to be the exciting, shiny toy that FPL managers go, oh, he's great, he scores goals, I've got to pick him at 11.5 million. But Jesus, at 8 million quid, last year got 120 points playing on the right-hand side for Manchester City. Now, he's going to play left, right, and centre this year. They're going to put him where he scores goals, whatever he does. And when he went to Man City, the reason why City bought Jesus was that he was this prodigal goal scorer. I saw him when I was seeing Brazil under-21s in a tournament and before the Olympics. And we saw this guy called Jesus. It was before he signed for Man City, and he was just off the charts. And we've never really seen that in the Premier League, but that guy is still in there somewhere. That kind of crazy goal scorer who can do all sorts of stuff. Played as auxiliary player, of course, for Pep Guardiola, but he's not going to do that at Arsenal. He's going to score lots of goals. Julian Alvarez is not going to start games at Man City, not in the first instance, but I think he's going to play a lot more minutes than people understand. So, of course, he made his debut in the Community Shield and he scored. 6.5 million, only 2.4% of managers own him. So this is your real wild card option. This is the one where you say about taking punts. Alvarez might only play 10 minutes a game, Haider. That might only come on the 80th minute and score every week because it's Man City. So this is a thing, I think, again, when you're looking at value and trying to squeeze the numbers, if you don't want to go with, say, a Haaland and a Kane together, or you don't want to go like waste a premium option, the way you can kind of negate those issues with money is getting a player like Alvarez. But I just think Jesus at 8 million, like it says 72.8% owning him. And you've got to remember, we're still 2 or 3 days away from the deadline. I think that's going to be over 80% because there'll be a lot of people just starting their teams in the next 2 or 3 days. And I think most people will look at Jesus, look at his preseason form as you said, scored 4 goals in one game. He looks hot. And if Arsenal play well this season, if Arsenal are top 4 and Arsenal were chasing the pack and really, really doing what you expect them to do, I think Jesus will be their top goal scorer.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's move on now, Rob, to two budget options in defence. One of them actually is sitting on my bench, and that's the player on the right-hand side, Nico Williams. He's moved to Forest. And Forest play 3 at the back, I believe, don't they? So he'll play as a wing-back most likely. Mm-hmm. And then you got Ryan Sessegnon as well. Interesting, at 4.5 million, only owned by 0.5%. Nico Williams a little bit more at 27.9%. I do think that's more down to the fact that he's 4 million rather than the fact that people are thinking, he's going to start. I think he's just one of those where thinking, okay, look, he's a budget option to put on the bench. Interesting with Sessegnon because I was thinking about this. So I've got Perisic in my team. I was having a look at the numbers as well. The comments from Conte regarding Matt Doherty and around Perisic, and he did say both are lacking a little bit of match fitness. So Sessegnon is probably the shoe-in to start at that left wing back position. Mm-hmm. But once they get up to speed, Perisic is going to start. He's on insane money as well. He's going to be the starter. One season I think where he's going to absolutely fly under Conte. He did it in his season at Inter when they won the league. I think Sessegnon, although he's great in terms of his value, and he's starting to cook last season as well, wasn't he, under Conte? I think he's a little bit of a risk because I don't know if he's going to start week in, week out.
Yeah, so just to explain to everyone watching, this is the budget section of the show. So we're kind of showing you premium. You can't buy premiums everywhere, can you? So this section of the show, we're going to kind of give you, for all positions, a kind of open book of the real best budget options. And again, you can kind of see here in terms of how much people own these people, whether they're kind of really looking at the numbers or looking at the potential. I'll start with Sessegnon. So Sessegnon has played all the preseason games for Spurs. And I think importantly, in the second half of last season, when he was fit, he played. And he played really well. So you're saying there, Perisic on a big wage, definitely going to pay. I'm not so sure. He's 5.5 million, Perisic. I'm not going to go anywhere near him at 5.5 million. It's too much money. I can get better value down the food chain.
What if he starts assisting?
If he starts assisting, I think you're thinking of Perisic from like 6 years ago, who you did it for Croatia every week and did it at Inter.
No, I'm thinking of Perisic from 2 seasons ago and even last season. 2 seasons ago, he was playing under Conte and he was playing as a left wing back, which I think really suits him. Yeah. And Lukaku was having an absolute field day and Lautaro Martinez was as well. So that's the Perisic. He's not the same marauding winger, but he's going to play as a wing back. He is 33 years old, I believe now, but he's still he's still fit as a butcher's dog. But that's the Perisic I'm thinking about. I can see like Kane is going to be very, very excited to play with someone like Perisic, who's got a great delivery.
Yeah, I watched Inter last year. Watched Perisic a lot. He's not fit as a butcher's dog, Haider. Not anymore. He's just not. I think he's lost a lot of it. So Tottenham took him because obviously there's that Conte link, and Conte will use him in that same role. Do I think that 5.5 million? Because this is what's important. It's not whether I rate the player or not. It's the value there in the money that you pay for him. I think at 5.5, there are better players. I would rather find that extra 0.5 and take Reece James. So that's how I look at it, yeah? There are better values when you balance it. So Sessegnon has played games in pre-season. I think he will continue to play. I think if he plays well, he'll hold his place in the team. And Nico Williams, you said that, it's right. He's going to play as a wing-back at Forest. Now, Forest have spent millions of pounds, redone their whole team, and Williams is going to be a big integral part of that team in terms of going forward and getting the ball forward for their new players in midfield and the attack. Now, you said there people have got him 4 million just because. I actually kind of think people are overlooking that. He's going to be a starter and he might get assists. Last year, Tsimikas at Liverpool, nonetheless, at 4 million, was getting incredible numbers. So Williams might be the guy Haider, you put at the bottom of your bench. And then when you're looking at your thing on Monday morning and go through it on your phone, you go, and he's got your 13 points, but you haven't got one of them. So he's going to be, I think, one of those wild card players. Because if Forest do well, I think Williams will do well. He'll get clean sheets. He'll get assists. And he's a massive progressive. Like, we even thought he'd do well at Liverpool. We thought he'd be a player that would get more minutes at Liverpool. It just didn't really work for him in that time. And I think
Trent,
Forest is
unfortunately.
Of course. And I think Forest is a good landing spot for him, where I think he can go there and be influential and kind of be a bit of a breakout star there for that football club.
Yeah, and I
Good
agree with
budget
that. He's
options.
definitely
4 and
yeah,
4.5 million. I think they
very
are
good.
players that will get you clean sheets and assists at
Yeah,
that price.
agreed. Now let's move on. So Jesse Lingard.
Here we go.
I actually, when I was
How
doing my
does
first
it?
draft, I didn't put him in. Now it's this Rob. You're getting it wrong.
That's it. I got it wrong way around.
Yeah,
I knew I'd got it wrong. Yeah.
But when I was looking at Jesse Lingard, he was definitely one of the options for me, and I was thinking 6 million. He's
Yeah.
going to start, which is why I think he signed for Forest as well. He's only signed for a year, but that was one of the reasons I think why he signed. He just wants to play week in, week out. We've got the World Cup in December as well in Qatar, so he could very well find himself on the plane. He's a great option at that price. Very happy to see him leave Man United. Actually, Rob, to be honest, I think he needed to go. But 5.8% own him, so not that many, but he's going to be a starter. So when you're looking at those 6 million options in midfield, you're mentioning Kulusevski, for example. Would you be choosing Jesse over Kulusevski?
1,000,000% every time. So we look at Jesse Lingard. I'm not thinking about Manchester United's Jesse Lingard. I'm thinking about West Ham's Jesse Lingard. So you said he's gone to Forest because he'll start. If he'd gone to West Ham, he would have started. He absolutely would have started. I think the thing with Jesse Lingard is that he's chosen this landing spot in Nottingham because he's going to be the star, the superstar at Forest. And Forest are a big club, and they're a club that are kind of trying to rekindle their way back, obviously back in the Premier League now for the first time in a while. And Lingard, and they've said this at Forest recently in the last week, Lingard is that marquee piece. The club is going to be about Jesse Lingard because they see what he did when he was at West Ham. He's going to run that show. He's going to be the number 10. He's going to be in the box. He's going to get assists. He's going to get goals, but only if Forest do well. So that's why he's 6 million. Yeah, because I think he's going to be one of those players that if he explodes and Forest explode, that next week will be 6.2, then it'll be 6.4, then it'll be 6.8, and it'll be 7.2. And before you know it, he'll be an 8 million player. Yeah, and it will depend whether you bought him at 6 million or 8 million. So that's the difference in terms of like running your own budgets. I think 5.8% is still low. I think that will go up significantly towards the back end. Again, if you look at the bottom end here with the fixtures that are coming up, Newcastle, West Ham, and Everton. So not a bad run there for Forest in the opening weeks. It wouldn't surprise me again if Forest lost all those games. Lingard might still score in all of them. Might well do. A team like Newcastle that he was linked to, his former club West Ham, he'll want to do that. He'll want to show what he can do. And this is his platform to get into the World Cup. So if he does well at Forest, he's going on that plane to Qatar and he knows it. So I think there's a big motivation for Jesse Lingard this year. He'll be a bona fide starter and he will definitely get FPL points.
There's a question here. Leon Bailey, Neto, Rashford. Don't worry, guys. We have you covered. Mike Cash, Rob. Let's touch on him. We've spoken about already. But 5 million, owned by 20.5%.
Yeah.
Good ICT rankings last year in terms of, you look at defenders, he was 6th out of 206.
Yeah.
Pretty nice starting fixtures as well. Bournemouth, Everton, and Palace. Again, I thought about him. I haven't gone for him, but I will make some changes. So, I'm sure my team. I'm happy with my team, but he was somebody I did consider. I'm just a bit unsure on Villa, Rob, to be honest with you, because I know they didn't have they had a decent start under Gerrard. Didn't have a great end to the season. They bought Kamara. Leon Bailey looks very good, and we will talk about him a little bit later. But yeah, I'm not sure on Villa. I'm not sure how many clean sheets I'll be getting, but he is a marauding fullback, so he will get forward.
Yeah, I think as well with Mike Cash, we did talk about him a little bit earlier on, but we'll kind of finish off on him in terms of why you should buy him or why you should look at him. The Perisic example is a really good balance, yeah? At £5 million last year in a dodgy Villa team, he got 147 points. Do I think Perisic will get 147 points for Spurs this season? No chance. Why? Because he'll get injured. He might not get the nod over Session, and there's a better rotation there for him and Session. So he might not play full minutes. He might come off the bench, might only play an hour of games. You have that issue. And that's where you're kind of looking at these dividings of like 5.5 and 5. Most people are like, well, there's not a lot of money there. But if you take that 0.5 out and then can use it on a Reece James, you're absolutely better off going with Cash and James than a Perisic on his own. So looking at Cash, really good start to the season in terms of the games that got played: Bournemouth, Everton, Crystal Palace. Let's look last season, ICT ranking overall in the Premier League of 47, but number 6 defender in ICT ranking. What we mean by ICT is kind of that overall effect in terms of how well they did in terms of all the metrics. So number 6 defender at 5 million. Can you refuse him? Yes. But should you refuse him if you're maybe buying a Perisic, Haider? Absolutely not. I think Cash is a shoe-in. And I think Villa will be better this year. I think they're a better structure. They've bought players much stronger. Gerrard now being first kind of proper full season here with new signings. I think there'll be a stronger team this year. And I think Cash will reflect that in his numbers.
Yeah, definitely. He's one on my watch list. I want to see how he does
Definitely.
because they weren't particularly great. So the new Chelsea signing Cucurella, and we've got Wesley Fofana in here who probably will join Chelsea. Are we saying that, Rob?
I think so. I think you know, you said Cucurella breaking news that he's signing for Chelsea and that deal is done. 50 million, I think they said. That's a lot of money for.
It is a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for Cucurella. Like, you know, Chelsea are really trying to.
I think he's a fantastic player, Rob. I think he would have been a great option at City as well. If he'd gone to City, I'd be shooing him in. I actually read somewhere, and I don't know if you saw this as well, or you can confirm this, but I read that Cucurella might play as a left centre back in a back three because they've got Chilwell and Alonso.
And that would be one reason not to buy him. So I think you're right. I think Cucurella might well play centre back, and especially this is why they're looking at Wesley Fofana. The reason why I kind of put these two players in there is that they are both budget players. But again, you can compare Cucurella at Brighton at 5 million and 126 points to Matt Cash, who obviously got more points at the same price point. But 8.9%, he's a Chelsea player now. It's pretty good in it for a Chelsea player to buy into their defence. Quite one of the things that we'll talk about during the season a little bit more is how to buy into form teams. So you might find that Cucurella, if he goes to Chelsea and does well straight away, and we see him at fullback, we might all be going, Cucurella, 5 million, get him now before he goes up to 5.1, quickly. But for Fofana as well, I just think, again, if you were looking for what I would call a bench and stash, 4.5 million. We talked there about Williams. I would probably still pick Nico Williams over Fofana today. But I do think Fofana's probably going to end up at Chelsea. He's crying his eyes out. They won't let me go to Chelsea. He's
Even
doing
though
all
he's
that.
injured the whole of last season.
Yeah, people at only 1.4% have bought him so far, but I think they're sleeping on him. But I think he will end up at Chelsea at 4.5 million. Yeah, fine if it's just one or two players that you're looking to bench and stash.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on now. Martinelli, we've touched on a little bit. He's in my team at the minute. 6 million is a really good price. As you said, he's been playing a lot in pre-season. Only about 18.3%. He is streaky, though, I think. And that's something I will say about Martinelli. And then also, I was chatting with my mate who's an Arsenal fan. He did say that he played an extended period and then he was then benched, wasn't he? So there is that risk. But maybe he's one of those players where you just take advantage of that gold and purple or that purple period that they have where they score a lot of goals and then you need to know when to bring them in and out. And then Dwight Mcneal has moved to Everton. I mean, I said this the other day, Rob. Dwight McNeil's moved. Tarkowski's also moved from Burnley to Everton. And I believe I saw somewhere Maxwell Cornet as well. Looks like he's not far from joining Everton. Yeah. So when Frank Lampard inevitably does get sacked, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Sean Dyche over there. I think he'd do a really good job, to be honest, because that's what they need. I mean, Frank Lampard is just awful, to be honest. He can't coach a defense to save his life. But having a look at this, Dwight McNeil's an interesting one. I'll be avoiding Everton like the plague, to be honest. I won't be touching any of their players. Calvert-Lewin, I've heard, is out for 3 months as well now, so that's a big problem. Yeah. Salomon Rondon will be playing up top, unless I don't even know who their options are, to be honest. Just thinking about Everton, Gordon might be an option that if you want to buy into Everton. He had a good season last season. He was actually very impressive. But yeah, Martinelli for me out of these two is the player that I've chosen my team, and I might still rotate him out for Lingard. But at the moment, as it stands, Martinelli will be in my team come Friday night.
Yeah, I think Martinelli at 6 million. If you're looking to buy into that Arsenal midfield, you've got Martinelli at 6 and you've got Odegaard at 6.5. And you've also got Smith Rowe at 6. And as we just said there, Smith Rowe out at the moment. I think Odegaard at 6.5 is really good value. But I think Martinelli at 6 at the moment is probably the best value. So this is what we're talking about now. We're not talking best player or player that's going to get you the most points or that. We're talking about buying into little markets to kind of make a much better, stronger squad. So I think Martinelli, we've talked about him. We won't kind of go into too much of that. We know what we think of him. Dwight Mcneal, big issue here now before we put this slide in, as you just said there about Calvert-Lewin. So Calvert-Lewin's now injured. And the reason why I kind of put McNeil in at 5.5, really low ownership. So if you're trying to buck the trend and maybe bring in someone that other people are not looking at, I think 5.5 is still relatively cheap and budget worthy. But I think if Everton do anything in the opening weeks of the season, I think Dwight Mcneal will be involved. He takes set pieces. He is a really good creator. When he was doing really well at Burnley was when Burnley were doing really well. And McNeil was one of those players that you could just draft in for 2, 3, 4 weeks if he had a good run of games and he'd get you points. He's just that kind of player. So I think, again, budget options at 5.5 and 6 million, both these two players here, if you were just looking for an option for the first few weeks, they're both pretty strong candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one interesting thing, Rob, as well, and I didn't know this, I saw it the other day, Odegaard is the new captain of Arsenal.
He is. So he's very good value. He's going to play every game. So 6.5, and he scores goals, he gets assists, he controls games, he's going to get ICT points, all the ranking points that you get, all the bonus points. So at 6.5, he's definitely someone you should consider, and I would probably consider him over Martinelli because he will be a bona fide starter. But it's about numbers. Can you squeeze that extra 0.5 out? Some will be able to. I think Arsenal fans will. Arsenal FPL managers will go, yep, I want that player in my team. But I think Martinelli, showing that he is starting matches on the left-hand side in pre-season, I get the feeling that he might be the pick for Arteta just in those first weeks.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think you've got to ride his good form as well because, like I said, he's a streaky player. Mctominay and Kovacic. I actually think we had a chat. I'll let you explain your reasoning here, but I actually think you make a good point. It really does depend. From what we've seen in preseason, though, Rob, McTominay has been playing in the sort of the number 6 role. He hasn't been going further forward as one of the 8s. Should he be allowed to go further forward? I think that will be a positive. And I think, looking at the value at 5 million. But Kovacic for me last season. I mean, look, Tommy 0.3% owned, and Kovacic again 0.9%, both under 1%. Kovacic was inspired. That was one of your best calls last year, and that was one of the ones I listened to early on. Until his injury, he was sublime. He was getting goals, he was getting assists, such good value for money. I was considering him when I was looking to buy into Chelsea. I haven't bought into Chelsea yet. So if you're looking at budget options, I mean, as it stands, I'd be leaning towards Kovacic, but you could see McTominay playing as a number 8.
Yeah, I think Kovacic last year was what you call a premium enabler. So someone that you could bring in your team who was playing really well for Chelsea, getting goals, getting assists early in the campaign, and it allowed you to go and buy another premium. So that's why you have him at 5 million. He's still cheap this year at 5. Mctominay also at 5, very, very low ownership for both below 1%. I think with Scott McTominay, people forget with Scott McTominay that, of course, he was a striker as a kid. Yeah, in our youth ranks at Manchester United, he likes to get in and around the box. I think someone commented on the tour that when they're kind of doing their drills and stuff, the one player that hit the target every time in Ten Hag's drills was Scott McTominay. He's actually a very accurate striker of the ball. So where will he play? What will he do? Will he even play? Well, that's a bigger question, I think, for it. But I think, again, at 5 million, he's probably going to start in Man United's midfield. And I know United fans won't like that, but this is not about what Man United fans like. This is about options. And I think Scott McTominay will be more of an 8 this year, not as a 6. So he's saying that he paid more as a 6 in the games in pre-season. I don't think he did. He did a little bit of both. Fred
played there as well, but yeah, I don't.
Fred played primarily as the 6, and McTominay was kind of in and out. So Scott McTominay, I think in the games that I saw for United were better when McTominay were in the team, and when he used to be substituted out after 60, 70 minutes. United look worse. So I think the manager will see that as well. And I think that means that Scott McTominay will keep his place more than
either way, that we're below the required level if either of them are playing, more than 30 games a season, I think.
But what's that? What, McTominay?
And Fred, both of them.
Yeah, but you're talking as a Man United fan. We are not Man United fans when we're talking about FPL. So this is an audience for all FPL fans. No one cares what you and me think about Scott McTominay.
No, of course.
McTominay, I think he will play. Yeah, I think he will play games because Man United haven't gone out and bought loads in that position. So they might get Frankie de Jong, but I would not be surprised that even if Frankie de Jong comes in, Scott McTominay is still playing games because you're not buying for that position as it stands. So we're not bothered about that. What we're bothered about is upside. And I think at £5 million, he got 68 points last year. Although it's a bit of a spell, didn't he? We had injuries. He was in and out a little bit more. But has obviously been a player that's played in that double pivot for season after season. United are not going to play that kind of double pivot anymore. And that means that McTominay will get up the field. And that means that he might just get those extra goals. Last year, was it? Or the year before, where he got 8-9 goals in the season? If a player at £5 million get me 9 goals a season, give me him on FPL. I want him in my squad. That's what I want, you see. It would be a bench option for me at 5 million. Both these players would be bench options. But that's what we're talking about now. We want budgets. We're looking at players that can give you a little bit of a shock and a surprise. I think McTominay is in that way, especially if United are passing the ball better, which we see in pre-season. McTominay might be a guy doing that third man run that people think Donny van der Beek's going to do. I don't think Donny van der Beek's going to be in the team. I think McTominay is more likely to play more minutes.
What about Eriksen,
and he'll be the guy doing that. What about Eriksen? Well, Eriksen's 6.5 million, I think, in terms of the numbers. The reason why he's not in our game week 1 list is that he's not up to fitness yet.
Yeah, I don't think he'll start.
He might not play. He still might get you in the system. Might come on and do something and put it on Ronaldo's head, and Ronaldo scores, and everyone goes, this is the future, and then Ronaldo leaves. That might happen. But I think with Eriksen, again, he is going to be a future pick. So if he gets in the team, gets up to speed, gets fit, he might be your number 10 creator. And you might go, do you know what? I don't want to spend 10.5 million on Bruno Fernandes. I'm going to spend 6.5 on Christian Eriksen. So there's that thing of where the prices go up and down. And I think with Eriksen, he is a player to look at in the future on your watch list, but not for this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's definitely one on my watch list for sure. Let's move on now quickly, Rob, to Dewsbury Hall and Marcus Rashford. I mean, I'm just shocked how cheap Marcus Rashford is. 6.5 million. I did not know he was that cheap. That can't be right.
That's right.
Million. Oh my God. That's like Marcus Rashford when he first broke in, the first few years. He put him in 6.5 million and he scored a lot of goals. I remember that season. Was it his breakout season? He was an amazing option. Mm-hmm. But that's crazy. Look, he's gonna start. He's gonna start on the left, most likely. And I think he's looking a lot sharper in preseason, but he's owned by 11%, so it's not a lot of people. And he had a really bad season last season. But I actually think at that value, that's actually blown my mind a little bit.
Yeah, it's 11%. It's 11% because people are judging him on last year, which obviously is that. But if you'd seen him in preseason and if you'd watched it and looked at the numbers and look at the metrics and kind of study that bit a little bit more, this is what we encourage FPL managers to do. You would see it at 6.5 million. This is a 9.5 million pound player from a couple of years ago.
It's mad.
Yeah,
it's mad.
A guy that had something like 34 goal involvements 2 years ago. You'd bite your hand off, wouldn't you, for 6.5 million? But we'll start with Julian Alvarez just on left at the moment. He was again what I would call a premium enabler. 5 million. Remember, there's a lot of change going on at Leicester City. Madison might be out the door, and you're going to see
Schmeichel's just left as well, Rob. To Nice. So anyone that's got Schmeichel in, you need to. Yeah, I actually fear for Leicester this year.
I think it's a difficult year for Leicester, but do you know what? They might reboot. They might actually bring in players that help them. Last year, they were kind of sliding. You found that Brendan Rodgers' reputation was damaged last year because of the injuries that they had and their poor form. They weren't really top 4 contenders. That's where they want to be. But Dewsbury Hall, I think, is going to be a starter. So 5 million, not too much more to say about him. Marcus, 11% ownership, like we said, 6.5. It's a no-brainer. If you want one Man United player in your team, like we talked a little bit about Delo, we've talked a little bit about Ronaldo. We haven't really talked about Bruno Fernandes. But Marcus Rashford at 6.5 million might end up as Man United's number 9 this year. He really might. Martial we'll talk about in a second. But 6.5 million for Man United's number 9, even if Man United are rubbish, it still means that Rashford's probably going to score goals and get assists. So he's going to play in that front line. And I do think that as it stands today, certainly with Man United not pulling the trigger on someone like Anthony, that means that Marcus Rashford is going to be a starter and he will start the Brighton game in game week 1.
Yeah, United a little bit light, but I think Jadon Sancho, I know he's a bit more premium, but I think I'm looking forward to watching him play. And I think he actually, I know he's been
sick though.
Yeah, he has been sick. So
Yeah.
hopefully he'll start on the weekend. But he's had a really, really good preseason. He looks very settled in Ten Hag's system. And I think he's going to be a real major source. That front three United, if it is Martial, Rashford, and Sancho, which I hope it is. I know you hope as well. We won't go too much into this. Obviously, there are non-United fans listening to this. But I actually think that is a front three that could score a lot of goals and get a lot of assists. So that's interesting. And now we are going to talk about Martial. So we've got Martial and Mitrovic up here on the screen. Martial, 7 million. Do you remember a couple of seasons ago where he had that really great season where he scored, I think he scored 20 goals, but anyway, it was during Project Restart, and he was fantastic. He had a really good preseason. I'm actually not surprised to see him back in the fold, because I always thought when you look at the player of his capabilities and some of his strengths, I think he actually fits what Ten Hag wants from a striker. The only thing about him, Rob, always is about attitude. But when we're talking about FPL terms, he will start this season. He's going to start as the number 9 for Manchester United. He's only 7 million as well. I've seen a lot of people have him in his team. I know he's only 6.9%, but I think he's a really good option. And look, he's cheaper than Jesus. So he's interesting. And then you're looking over at Mitrovic, 6.5 million. He struggles in the Premier League, to be honest with you. I was tempted, I'll be honest, because he's had a great season at Fulham. But I just don't think that I don't think he's worth the risk at the minute. But Martial, definitely.
I think, well, Mitrovic, we'll start with him. I've had him in the past because he's always been a really good budget option, and he's done nothing. And Fulham have done nothing, and they get relegated, and that's that. And then they go back to the Championship, and they all start playing well again. I think with Mitrovic, the reason why I think he's viable this year at 6.5 is that last year, statistically, he had his best kind of goal involvement season. So he's not just a goal scorer anymore, which is what he's always been known for, putting the ball in the back of the net. Now become a little bit of a creator. He's kind of joining the dots a little bit more on the edge of the box. He's helping his team a lot more. So if that Mitrovic turns up for Fulham, and Fulham have got some new signings and Fulham want to have a go this year, you'll find, I think Mitrovic will definitely start. But he might not be, say, the number 9. He might be more of a false 9. He might be kind of in there to get on the edge of the crosses and, and try and head the ball in there and do very Mitrovic things. But I think he might be a guy that helps the midfield a little bit more. That will definitely impact on things like his bonus points. So 7% ownership. Again, I think one of those players that they gets promoted. You're looking for a promoted player. People go, I love Mitrovic. Anthony Martial, as you said there, 20 goals a season at his very best. Last season, nothing, zilch. When we did Ten Hag due diligence, when he was coming to the football club and we knew that United were talking to Ten Hag, one of the big kind of feedbacks at the time was he really likes Anthony Martial. So we've seen that. Anthony Martial's started as a number 9 in pre-season. He's played well. He scored goals. Will he continue that into the Premier League? I'm not 100% sure. He might well do. But I think he's going to start games. He's going to be involved in some capacity. He might come off the left or he might play through the middle. 7 million. It's kind of expensive. It's okay. I would probably
not if he shows what he's capable of. It's not.
Well, not if he shows it, but we're talking about punts and we're talking about doing it in a logical fashion. So if you're a Man United fan, yeah, take Martial because you love Man United and you want Martial to do well. Do I want Martial at the moment? No, because I think
I'm not putting him in my team either.
Are you choosing Martial at 7 or are you choosing Julian Alvarez at 6.5? So that's your choice. So there's all these little like head-to-heads, I think, that when you're looking at a player, you go, I do like him. He plays for my team, or I think he might do well. But is he still really the best value out there, pound for pound? So Martial would not advise people not to buy him because he could just pop and do really well. He might get you like 7, 8, 9 goals in the first 3 or 4 games. And then you're away, aren't you? Then it's the kind of player that everyone's going to have. But 6.9% in terms of his overall ownership, that doesn't surprise me. I think he'll probably stick around that until he starts scoring goals.
Let's move on now, Rob, to the last budget player. So we got Sam Greenwood. When I read this, I'll be honest, I thought he was another Greenwood. So that scared me. But no, we're talking about Sam Greenwood from Leeds. The lowest valued striker, isn't he? Forward in the in FPL, 4.5 million. He's owned by quite a lot, 24.9%. But I imagine people are just trying to find a budget option, for their bench. We've got Pedro Neto, a player that I'm a real big fan of, 5.5 million. Back last season from his ACL injury. I think he's encouraging in terms of his form. I think he's a very good option. I'm interested to see what he does. But Leon Bailey, I think, is a standout one for me at 5 million. Owned by 12%, had a really good preseason. He completely changed the game against Man United, didn't he? He came on and they were 2-0 down, 2-2. He absolutely destroyed Telles during that game. Telles is now gone. So if anyone has him in the team, I'm sure you haven't. But if you have, he's gone to Sevilla on loan. So when you have a look at that, the one that stands out to me, to be honest, Rob, is Leon Bailey. I think I'm tempted to take a punt on him. But not just because of that, because I think that he has looked really good in preseason. And if he can keep fit, he's going to be an interesting player.
I think Bailey and Neto are the outstanding options at around the 5 to 5.5 mark in the whole game. So, that's kind of what you're looking at. Can you get these really lower value players into your team? Not just because they're bench and stash players, but because they're actually going to maybe get you points. Like, wouldn't that be nice? Like having a player at 5 million, 5.5 who gets you points every week. We'll start with Sam Greenwood, though, because it's very, very short. He would be your absolutely archetypal bench and stash player. 4.5 million, not really going to play many minutes for Leeds. But when he has played for Leeds, he's done all right. So he'd be someone that you'd have at the bottom of your bench because you really can't work your numbers out. And 4.5 million, you just need to spend that money, put a player in. Greenwood's fine. But I think when you look at Neto and Bailey, I still think that Neto is the better option. Neto's had a better preseason than Bailey. Bailey's had a sparkler because he did well against Man United and everyone went, oh, Bailey. So he did have another good game after that and he did score in that game as well. But when you look at Villa's attack, there's still that chance that he isn't going to start. He still might be a guy knocking on the door, but doesn't really get in all the time with Gerrard. That's not 100%, but that's the way I read it when you look at the selections that Gerrard has made throughout preseason. But when you look at Neto, obviously got the ACL injury last year, but the year before that, he was at the height of his powers, playing wide, playing through the middle. Obviously, he had that incredible partnership with like Jotter, Jimenez. Jimenez is now back full time. Obviously, last season he was as well. But Neto's been starting all the preseason games, getting assists, getting goals, playing off the striker, number 10, playing wider areas. I think at 5.5 million, if you wanted one Wolves player this year, and there's a lot of good Wolves players because they're a good team, 5.5 million, it's a no-brainer for Neto. He's the outstanding pick in the budget market.
Now, Rob, drum roll, please, everyone, because this is the big team reveal. I'm excited for this.
First.
Yeah, squad reveal first, but that will give you an idea on who Rob has picked. And I'll also get my team up on my phone and we can discuss sort of going through your team. But it'll be interesting to see because I actually, when I was doing the slides, I didn't have a chance to look at it properly. But I do know you have no Salah or no Trent, which is crazy. But we have it here up on the screen. So let's go through it. So we'll go through it bit by bit, Rob. So we'll start with the goalkeepers, then we'll go defense, midfield, then we'll go attack. So you've gone for Ederson. So you've gone against almost everything that you said last season in terms of having an expensive keeper or not.
Yep.
What's the reasoning behind that?
Right. The reason why I've done this, so this is my squad. And firstly, I just want to say we're an hour and 42 minutes into the show. So thank you for everyone who's watched live. But if you're watching on playback, also thank you for sticking with us because there's a lot of information in this and I hope it's been helpful. At least you'll be able to take some notes and maybe compare it in the weeks ahead and say, well, were they actually any good at what they said in game week 1? But this is my squad and I'm going to explain why this is my squad. So you're right there. You said that in terms of Ederson, the goalkeepers. I went for a pairing this year of Sanchez, who I think, again, at Brighton has just done really well. Not huge numbers, but just a regular player who's going to play every game. Brighton did really well defensively in the second half of the season. Sanchez was obviously a big part of that. But you'll see in here, and we'll do each kind of column as we go along. We'll look at each row. The reason why I managed to get an Ederson in there, who was the number 3 goalkeeper, I think, for the season and big points, it's because I saved a little bit of money elsewhere. And that's why I haven't got Salah. That's why I haven't got Trent. Because I feel that I've still got good enough midfields and good enough defenses to get all the points I want every week and have a better goalkeeper. So this is all about balance. It's no point talking about Ederson. We know why you choose Ederson. I think at 5.5, it's negligible, isn't it? When most of the goalkeepers are 5 this year. In years gone by, they've been 4.5 and 4s. They're mostly 5s. It's not a big jump from 5s to 5.5. So in my first draft, I had Ramsdale in my team. Again, he was my goalkeeper last year at 5 million. I got the extra 5.5 away from Salah and I got the extra 0.5 away from Trent. and I got a hugely better goalkeeper in terms of stats and statistics. So yeah, if you want to go with 2 4.5s, go with it. You know, there's something that I used to preach, always go with 2.5s, but it was more about could you fit your premiums in? I've still got, I think, a team packed with premium players, and I feel pretty good about it in terms of looking at my back five, my midfield five, and then our front three.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Edison. I can see your reasoning, but I'm not sure because I think, I mean, yeah, it just feels like no City midfielder is City's midfield is difficult, to be honest with you, Rob. Like I struggle to think about, Foden you swore
Who's
by
going to
last season.
start? Who's going to
That's the
start in City's
problem.
midfield? You don't know, and I
Yeah,
don't know. So that's the problem.
yeah,
Totally.
that's the problem. I mean, let me get my team up as well, so I can talk about my goalkeepers.
Yeah.
So I believe I went with Sanchez as well. It's just loading at the minute.
Yeah.
And look, look at the price. I was actually quite surprised, Rob, to see he was still 4.5 million.
Yeah.
So I went Robert Sanchez, but also went with Nick Pope, which I thought was
Okay.
an interesting one because I just think that when I'm having a look at him, 5 million, he's going to play week in, week out. Newcastle should have a decent defense this season. They've signed Botman as well. They've still got Shaqiri and Trippier. I think they're going to be good this year. And yeah, I just felt like mid-table goalkeeper, 5 million, it allowed me to save that 0.5 million.
Yeah, I think Edison will get probably 20 or 30% more points over the season. So that's my reasoning,
Probably.
you see. So Nick Pope was a player that I always used to have in every year. At Burnley, 4.5 million every season. And he used to get he used to be like 22nd or third in clean sheets every season because Burnley, that was their specialty, wasn't it? So I think now, obviously, with the move that he's made, do I think that his new club will replicate that? I don't. I think they'll do well, but I think they'll do well in other parts of the park. I think Nick Pope will still get clean sheets. Do I think is he better than Sanchez and Edison as a partnership? Saying Sanchez and Pope, for me, just a preference. No, I think Edison that extra 0.5 this year. City were the best defensive team in the league last year by quite a distance. Most clean sheets. And Edison, you can even get you the odd assist, can't you, when he's playing those long balls out? So I think that Edison at 5.5, if he was 6, Haider, wouldn't touch him. Because I'd be like, it's too much money. But I think at 5.5, there's a calculated gamble in there for a Manchester City defender. And as you said about the midfield, which we'll talk about, that was the reason why I went for a Man City goalkeeper, because I think Man City's midfield this year, Mahrez will start some games and he won't, and Grealish will start some games and he won't. And you just don't know how they're going to shape up at the moment.
Rob, question here. Ward at Leicester, Danny Ward, 4 million. Goalkeeper.
Now?
I don't trust Leicester. Yeah, now he'd be good
because of what's happening. Yeah, because like in real time, things change in football. And now you're seeing that Schmeichel might go, but you might take him at 4 million today, and tomorrow Leicester might go and buy a new goalkeeper. And that's a problem. So you've got it's just keeping your options open. But yeah, he might be someone that, again, if you wanted to do a bench and stash for a goalkeeper because you had a premium or you were going with one goalkeeper, he might be good at 4 million.
Yeah. Let's move on to the defense. Reece James, Robertson, Cancelo, Zinchenko, and Ryan Sessegnon. So if I compare that to me, I've gone for Trent, Cancelo, similar to you.
Yeah.
We've gone for Dallo, 4.5 million. Perisic, but I was always a bit unsure on Perisic anyway.
Yeah.
And Nico Williams is sitting on my bench.
Yeah, look, your back five might be better than my back five. I think that this is the strongest back five I've ever picked in FPL because they're all players who are creatives. Every one of them, like it's mad, isn't it? Like imagine you don't need defenders anymore. They're all creatives. They get forward. They get you assists. They get you goals. They take set pieces. For me, I'm trying to buy into teams. You can see that in terms of the top teams, I got in my whole squad. I got one Chelsea player. That kind of surprised me because I was looking at it. But Chelsea have got kind of 6 fullbacks this year who are all really good. And now they've bought Cucurella. So you just, again, not really sure. I think the one player who definitely starts is Reece James. Robertson, definite starter at 7 million. For me, that was why I saved that extra 0.5. I took Trent out. And I think it's a roll of the dice. Again, you might get the first 5 game weeks and Trent might get 2 assists and Robertson might get 6. just the way it goes, isn't it? Cancelo definitely going to get assists with Haaland at the top end of the pitch. Zinchenko, we talked about, and Session, we talked about. So I think as a back five, I've spent quite a lot of money on that back five. You know, they're all pretty premium, but Zinchenko's the player that's allowed me to not go over the top. 5 million, I think, for a starter at Arsenal. That gives me players, my whole defence, Chelsea, Liverpool, City, Arsenal, and Tottenham, with a City goalkeeper, and then obviously a Brighton goalkeeper. That back seven for me works. That tells me points, clean sheets, and I can build on that defence. Even if there's injuries, I could drop one of them out. I could drop Robertson if he gets injured and find the money to go and bring Trent in. There's a good balance there in that back line.
Midfield, Martinelli, Bailey, Son, Neto, and Lingard. No Salah, as we mentioned earlier on the show. I've gone for Mo Salah, and I'm captaining him against Fulham. I've gone for Martinelli as well. I had Saka in there initially. I had a combination of Saka and Kulusevski, but I took out Kulusevski and Saka, and I brought in Martinelli and Mahrez. Mahrez is only 8 million. He's actually really cheap, and like he's probably going to be the starting winger. I'm the same though about City. It was him or Foden. I haven't seen much of Foden in preseason. I need to go and have a look to see if he's played. But I didn't. Obviously, he didn't start, did he, against City? I don't know if he was injured or not. Sorry, against Liverpool in the Community Shield. And then I've got Andreas and Declan Rice on the bench. So my midfield actually is weak. I put Andreas on the bench because he's 4.5 million. He probably will start for Fulham. And then Declan Rice at 5 million was someone I put on the bench as well. Again, I'm not particularly happy with that, but I need to play around because Perisic is 1 million. Well, he's costing me 1 million. Session was 4.5, for example.
And the big question there. Yeah, the big question there is, of course, you put Salah in. So this is why Salah was in my first draft and is not in my final draft, because it's, can you steal the pennies to get the pounds to get better talent? So that's still, like, I think they're like, you're not obviously satisfied with your midfield. When I look at my midfield here, it's one premium in Son. So I would call him a super premium, golden boot winner. So goal scorer, assister, is going to be all part of everything that's good at Tottenham. And then all the other players are kind of creatives that can score goals. And that's the way I've looked at it. Kind of almost like, wingers and tens. That's the way I've looked at it. I've tried to not stray away from that formula. Martinelli, we talked about. Bailey, we talked about. Neto, we talked about. And we talked about Lingard. I think, again, at those price range, Haider, at 5 to 6 million, it becomes a little bit of a no-brainer. I kind of think to myself, I wanted Grealish in my first setup. I want Grealish is going to get assists at £7 million because he's just going to give the ball to Haaland. That's what he'll do. And I watched Grealish play in pre-season. I wasn't impressed. Just thought, looks playing too deep, not getting close enough to Haaland, not getting close enough to the striker. Now that might change, but I still think when you're looking at Manchester City, really tough to pick a three that works, that are going to play. Ederson's going to play, Cancelo's going to play, and then my wild card, really because of the price, as we'll talk about in a minute, is Julian Alvarez, because I do think he'll play a lot more than people realise. Kind of this year's version. What was it, the lad who went to Barcelona from City?
Which lad?
Forgotten him. That went last year, the Spanish guy.
Oh, what, Garcia? The defender?
No,
sorry, it's Ferran Torres.
Ferran Torres. So he's this year's Ferran Torres. So I picked Torres in my team. People were like, well, he's not going to start. And he was coming off the bench scoring goals. So there you go.
He went.
So then he went, and then he left. So that was all right. Then I sold it. So that's the way to do it, to kind of look at those kind of pockets. I think that midfield five I'm really happy with, because I feel all five are starters. I feel all five, even if there's an injury, so say Son does his ankle in the warm-up, I'm good with going Martinelli, Bailey, Neto, and Lingard in any given week. So I think that's the way you got to play it with midfielders, is just have creatives, number 10s, who will get you goals.
Let's move to front three now, Rob.
Yeah.
Jesus, we've mentioned Alvarez already, and Harry Kane. I went for similar, Jesus and Kane, but I could only afford Mbumo as well from Brentford. He had some really good numbers though, and he had a good, like we saw from the value, in terms of points last season to value. This year he was second only to Tony. So he will get points. You've already told your thought process. I'm actually going to reveal your team now for the first game week as it stands, because obviously this might change, but this is what you've gone for the minutes. You've gone
Might
Ederson in
change.
goal. Yeah, it's probably going to change. Everyone's probably going to change. But 4-4-2, Robertson, Cancelo, Reece James, and Zinchenko. Then you've got Martinelli, Son, Lingard, Neto. And then Kane and Jesus with a bench of Sanchez, Alvarez, Sessegnon, and Bailey.
So this, to me, like one of my hashtags that I invented years ago for Man United is 4-4-2 is dead. 4-4-2 is not dead in FPL. 4-4-2 is still pretty good in FPL. I think that we are moving towards a model for FPL of back five, midfield three, and a two. Now, one of the things that they flirted with when they were talking about FPL rule changes this year was that they were going to allow you to play 5-4-0. But they're not letting you do that.
Yeah, so, I was going to ask you that because that's something
there's no point
saying last season.
Yeah, so they're not doing it, so it doesn't matter, does it? So I think when you look again, that back four, I think, is completely solid with an amazing goalkeeper behind them. I'm looking at that midfield four there, really happy. I think they will all start. I think they've got all good chances of scoring. And that front two, I think, picks itself. For me, it's also the teams that they're playing. So Liverpool have got Fulham, really good matchup. City have got West Ham, not too bad. Chelsea are playing Everton. People think Everton are going to fall off a cliff this year. And Zinchenko, if he plays, he's playing Crystal Palace. So again, not a really too tough of a matchup. Looking at the midfield, for me, I think Tottenham there with Son and Kane. The reason why they are my captain, my vice captain, is I think they might actually do a big number on Southampton. So Southampton haven't really strengthened. They have bought players. They will have a little bit of a different setup, but they're still Southampton, aren't they? And they're a team, I think, on the decline under Hasenhüttl. I really like Hasenhüttl as a coach tactically, but are Southampton at the kind of apex of where they want to be? I think they're going to be relegation candidates this year. Maybe on game week 1, they'll give Tottenham a scene to. There's always one team that do that, don't they, to a bigger club on the opening day. But I like Son, I like Kane. And you know what, Haider? That used to be my pick every season. Son and Kane were my first two picks in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, yeah? And of course, Kane didn't do it last year, and I didn't pick him because he wanted to go to City. And last year, I did go back to Son and Kane for a little bit, but Son was my main guy. I went with Son and Salah in the end. So that's the difference. Kane is the guy I've gone for, really, over Salah. And I've saved that extra kind of like it's 1.5 million difference from Kane and Salah, 13 to 11.5. Do I believe that Salah will get more goals and assists than Kane in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season? No, I don't. I think Kane can at least match it or even do better, and that's why he is my captain. So I've still got Liverpool players. I've got, one Liverpool player there, and I want to see Liverpool and City in the flesh because they've got changes happening, and it might be in game week 2 when we do the next show, and it won't be 2 hours long, everyone. It will be a case that we look at that and we might go, oh, Darwin Núñez, hat-trick, opening day of the season. Jotta's back, £9 million. You play Jesus and Jotter together, and then you're saving an extra 2 million from Kane. And you know what? It's goodbye to Lingard or a Martinelli or someone like that. I'm going to find a way to upgrade to Salah again. So that's the way to kind of play it, I think, in game week 1. I think that this team, with that bench as well, you see that with Alvarez, Sessegnon, and Bailey, I was even thinking about paying my bench boost in week 1. I don't know if I'll have a stronger bench all season long, because there might be times where I go, I'm going to Nico Williams now because I want to find a way to just clear out the bottom of my bench so I can put more money into my team. For me, people talk about wild cards. You said they didn't use your wild cards too late because people sit on them and it can sit on them too long. I always say save your wild cards to a little bit later. But start the season, I remember Aguero, was it last year, was my captain. And I went triple captain and he scored nothing. And that was that. And I burnt it. But it happens. But I think that bench could score points in game week 1.
Rob, that is a wrap for game week 1 big team reveal. Guys, I really hope that you found that helpful. We've gone into a lot of depth. We've given you sort of the reviews per each position. We've given you the best value players in terms of their performance last year versus the value this year. We've done head-to-heads in terms of Salah versus Son, Trent versus Cancelo, Haaland versus Kane. We've given you notable budget options as well. And then here's the big team reveal. And make sure you do join the league as well. It's the hashtag FPL Masterclass League. The code is BI8361. And, Rob, as we go forward in the season, obviously there's a lot more great content on this channel. This show will be shorter. We won't be doing 2 hours every week. What can the listeners look forward to as we go forward into the season?
Yeah, look, I think we'll talk to our FPL customers today. I think that's the way to do it, because not everyone is a Man United fan, but obviously plenty of Man United content on here with our original masterclass. That will be back, post games. We'll also be doing pre-game shows, which is new for this season. We'll be doing it on Twitter through Spaces, so look out for that. But for FPL, I think, the show every week will be around kind of a 45-minute show. And we'll try and do what we've done today, but in a more compacted sense, and give you reasons why I will be changing this team, or why I'm trying to look for points in other parts of FPL. So that's kind of the way we'll try and do it. As Haider said, I'll just reiterate again with the game code at the bottom. Join our league. It's BI8361. But the most important thing is that if you like our shows, whether it be United fans or whether it's FPL fans, please go and retweet it on Twitter, or do your own tweets about it. Big it up. Sing to your friends about it and your family. Please tell everyone, because that's how we try and grow these things. So we've given you 2 hours of content today on FPL, and I've not seen any other show kind of do it as in depth as we've done it this week. You've got 2 days to get your final teams in, so you can use the show and pick through it with a kind of with a pair of tweezers and find what you need. But please, please, please share, tell your friends, and join our league. Send the league code by all means to everyone you know. I think we've got about 800 players in there from last year, so it's growing all the time. We'll probably have well over 1,000 by the time we start, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll do a prize for the winner at the end of it.
Absolutely, guys. And give us a follow on @Haider_Rubbani, and give Rob a follow on @Rob_B, and the new Twitter handle for the newly branded United Masterclass channel is @ManUnitedMC. So make sure you give us a follow, because we will be doing, if you are a United fan, we will be doing Twitter Spaces as previews before games. So that could be the day before the game. So watch out for that. That'll be on Saturday evening. So give us a follow on these channels, on these handles, otherwise you'll miss it. Good luck, everyone, and we will see you all next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.